Hello, my kitty cats. Welcome to Chit Chats with Git Cats number 17. I had to look over there to see that. With Jason Space Smith. I'm really looking forward to this. I haven't chucked over to him yet. He's waiting in the wings. Music publishing, sync licensing, all that kind of stuff. If you're a songwriter, you really need to know about that stuff because that's a great way to be earning an income, have your music heard, be able to walk down the bloody street and have people come up to you and hassle you and say, hey, you're that guy on the pop charts that's making no money. Music sync licensing is where it's at. So I have a really cool friend, Jason Space Smith, and he's right beside me. Please welcome Space.
Yo, what's up, dude? How are you?
I'm so good, mate. We got the dueling mohawks going on.
Yes, we do.
It's kind of cool.
Like we're connected from so far away. I love it.
It is, yeah. Dude, can you explain to me what is music sync licensing? What's that all about?
Wow, it's a great question. It's also a great way to turn your intellectual property, that being your recording master and the IP as far as the publishing is concerned within your song, and getting that in the hands of the right people so that then they can place those materials in TV shows, movies, short little TV spots, an iPod commercial, even if we're using iPods anymore, those kinds of things. I like to call it, and I've been calling it this for quite some time now, since 2010, when it sort of started to really, well, especially when I started to reap the rewards of which, but I've been calling it the new sort of radio, because it kind of really is. So that's in a nutshell,
cool,
kind of what it is, yeah.
Now, so just to let people know that you actually know a thing or two about it, what's some of the films or TV stuff that you've had music appear in?
So predominantly like a lot of television stuff, like Vampire Diaries, How to Get Away with Murder. I had a song in the Ellen DeGeneres show a couple of weeks back before all this craziness started. Television promos. I have a new promo that's coming out for a TV show called Station 19, I think it's called. It's like a Grey's Anatomy spinoff. I have a promo for that. Teen Wolf. Like it seemed to be all of the shows that the kids loved.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic because that's the demographic. From a business oriented standpoint perspective, that's kind of the demographic that you want to go after.
Cool. So for somebody who's writing songs at home, like there's no point in writing great songs and being in your bedroom and going, wow, this is great. If only people would hear it, and if only I could make some money out of doing this and refine my art by making enough money to be able to stay at home, enhance my craft and get really good at it, which is a really hard thing if you've got a record deal these days, because generally you get one shot, one song, and then how does somebody get into it? What's the next step? I've written this great song. I want to get it out on TV and movies. How do I go about that?
So let's dissect what your question is there, right? Cool. So I think there's this massive misnomer, and I went through this just from my experience, having moved from Australia. I was a guitar player in a rock band back there, trying to get a record deal. It just wasn't going to happen in Australia, at least not for us. And then migrating from there to here, massive move, suitcase and a guitar in one hand, and let's see how this goes. So to cut a long story short, it was 3 Australians and 1 American in that band. There was a band called Memento, which was kind of like a continuation of the band Tower. There's a whole point to all of this.
Yeah.
The 3 of us, the 3 Australians, were kind of really anchored to this complete misnomer that you get one shot. You get one shot, and that's it. And that is, I think that is the most imperative and most dangerous part of a musician's life and their lifestyle, or how they view themselves and how they view their future, right? Because if you set yourself up to that one thing, if you don't achieve that, you failed. And then people give up.
Yeah.
and they give up for the wrong reasons. Like I've always said, the long play is always the better play.
Uh-huh.
You know, you get more out of it. And I can say that as a 45-year-old man now, looking back in the last 20 years of my career, like I wish I had known that more way back when, instead of trying to, there's nothing wrong with like reaching for the stars and trying to attain these crazy goals. Because, if you're lucky enough, you might just, get them and achieve them.
Yeah.
But I think immediately, people, young musicians need to change the way, I feel, need to change the way that they look at a career or the space in general. Because now I feel like it's so ubiquitous. It's like it spans from YouTube, from creation to, you talked about how does one get heard, right?
Yep.
If you're writing songs at home and you want those songs and those materials to be in the hands of people where they can place them into commercials and, make some money out of it.
Yep.
I think what would be interesting nowadays, and I think you see a lot of this on YouTube especially, or even Twitch or any sort of streaming format, showcase your story. Like, I want to see your path. Like, show me how you created this beat. I think another sort of misnomer is that I think artists in general try to do this with their wares.
Yeah,
like they want to hold it so dear and close to them.
Yep. And
again, attached to that is this sort of misnomer again of like selling out. What's wrong with making a living at creating art?
Absolutely.
It's trust me, it's amazing. It gives you the freedom to continue to do so.
I think you hit the nail on the head there about that holding your wares close in there. Back when we were in the band scene back in the 90s on the Gold Coast here, there was a lot of that amongst people, and I grew out of that and realized that, no, don't view people as competition. Work together. And I'm fairly new to the whole YouTube thing, and I kind of clicked onto it a few years ago that, man, there's no guitar heroes. I'm playing these small gigs. No one gives a fuck. They're not there to see the band.
Cares.
So, I actually made the conscious decision that I'm not going to play shows unless they're for a ticketed show anymore. Like, people pay money to come and see you. I do help out the odd friend, and if they've got a cover band and it's like, yeah, I know that, man, I'll just come along and play. But that was a big turning point. But I did see that, no, it's all online now. And what I'm getting at is, rather than viewing all these other YouTubers as competition, I had some pretty top dudes reach out to me really early and just gone, dude, come with us. You're one of us. And I'm like, I've got no subscribers. It'll come. And it's still coming along. But everybody works together, not against each other. And that's a kind of mentality, isn't it, that you got to take on and stop viewing everybody as competition.
It's this weird, like, it's a sense of ego, right? It's narcissism at its core. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with having ego. There's nothing wrong with being confident, but know your place. Be humble as well.
Yep.
But you as one soul entity can only do so much. And if you're on fire, what's the first thing you're going to call for? Help.
Yep.
So we need to help each other, and that's what it's all. Yeah, the Gold Coast scene, it started to really affect me. Yeah. Back when, this is in the 90s, and like even some of the most fun times that I ever had was actually being on stage with you in your project Skateboard. There was a time where I was playing in maybe 4 or 5 different bands. I remember playing the Rosen Crown, which was an old venue back in Surface Paradise. It was the place, right? It was the place, other than the playroom. But there was, I think, Monday through Sunday, I played there every single night.
Cool.
But there was this sense of community there back then. But I think it was few and far between. Like, there were people like yourself, myself, a couple of other, like Nathan from Julian Day, God rest his soul. He was another one of those guys that just wanted to play,
Yeah.
Those days, man, I really miss those days.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Space, let's just say, for instance, I've written a song, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm not bending over to what's expected of me to get radio play. I'm not interested in that, but this is great. This would really fit a movie. What's the next step for me? How do I take it to that level?
Right. Yeah. So what I found over the course of the last few years, sort of in the advent of film and TV licensing, music licensing, kind of exploding. There was a point. So I have this project called Digital Daggers, which we became so ubiquitous within the licensing space to the point where we used to have these things in the industry, like between music publishers. And when you're a songwriter, you're working with different songwriters throughout. Like I'd be working with people from Universal Publishing, or other people who are on EMI, or what have you. You're all kind of like interdispersed. And they used to send out these sort of who's looking lists and these sort of call sheets of what the publishers and music licensors are looking for. And I would see like Digital Daggers names throughout, these call sheets. And at that moment, I immediately thought, oh shit, the party's over. The party's over. Because now everyone's figured out that this style or genre of music works within this sort of, a plethora of TV shows and movies and whatnot. So I'm going to circle back around to your point or your question. There's been this influx of music, film and TV licensing, so much so that there's so much of it now. Because everyone's become sort of wise to this sort of new space, and it's like we're almost 20 years deep into the space of music licensing, like wow. In the new sense. Yeah, it had been around, prior to that. It was just utilized in a different way. It was kind of like this secret. So it started to come to the surface, and people started to recognize that this was an occurrence, especially in the advent of, people weren't buying records anymore. Everything's become digitized. You're purchasing stuff from iTunes online. Yeah. It becomes an immediate purchase. So then, you see this connection between audience and creation. So that gap became completely bridged. And if you were smart enough to recognize, you've just eradicated the middleman, the record company. Yep. Record companies in 2020, record companies are what's the word? They're obsolete. Yep, they're absolutely obsolete. Totally. And they have been for quite a while, but I think we've now hit the tipping point. So from a music supervisor's perspective, and these are the people, whenever I say music supervisor, this is a person whose job is to listen to music constantly, search online. Like a lot of these guys and gals are searching online, and they still have their connect to the people at the music publishers who are basically just selling. This is a lot of information, so I'm trying
cool,
to
man. That's cool. I'm here to learn, and I'm listening. I'm taking notes.
And this will be here forever, which is great. Yeah. So forgive me if anything sort of goes over your head. Please, tell me to stop so I can reel it in.
We could always do a follow-up one if people do have questions after the fact and they're in the comments. We could always do a follow-up. So please do, if you're watching this after the fact and you went, hey, you didn't touch on this, let us know in the comments and we'll come back and answer them.
That'd be great. I want to offer my, at the end of this, I want to give out an email address for people to contact me if they need any help or anything like that, like from production standpoint, songwriting standpoint, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so it's a long-winded way of saying, of trying to answer the question of how to get your music into the hands of people to actually place that. It's kind of a lot of it's all up in the air because the whole sort of industry is slightly being displaced, especially given the circumstances globally now, right? People are in their offices. You're not having those conversations and those drinks after work. So I have a point person at Sony ATV, which is one of my publishers. And the whole aspect of going out for drinks, maybe on a Thursday or Friday night, with other music supervisors, they develop these relationships. We develop relationships with our people at Sony or whatever publisher so much so that there's compassion between your point person at your publisher and you as an artist. There's a relationship there, and it just kind of ripples out. The development of relationships between music supervisors and point people at publishers are almost the key to getting your wares placed. There's that sort of element. But then ultimately the question comes down to the music supervisor that's going to place your song. Maybe it's 30 seconds of your song that goes into this one pivotal scene in this episode that is trying to convey some sort of emotion, right? Underneath dialogue or even a part of the dialogue. The question is this artist an artist? Meaning, is this just some guy in a home studio and that's his song and that's it? Is he an artist, or is he or she an artist? Is there content to back up the fact that you have a presence? So I think at the end of the day, as important as the craft of the songwriting, the craft of the production, the craft of the relationships, there's also the craft of branding oneself. Because from a music supervisor's standpoint, they're going to see multiple options, right? And it's ultimately whatever is going to serve the scene or the commercial or the movie, in the best way. But the ultimate question is this an entity? Is this something that could benefit from this trajectory? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. You're touching on a few things there that I've been taking notes. When I cut away and it's just you're seeing me jotting shit down, going, we'll come back to that. Yeah. But what you touched on there was building relationships. Yeah. And that's a very big thing.
Massively.
Yeah. So last year I went to a YouTuber event, 42 Gear Street. It was all the big guitar YouTubers. And I was a little bit out of place because these guys all had, 100,000 subscribers, and I went there with 500. And I did get a vibe from a couple of the bigger guys, like, what the hell is this guy doing here? He's trying to muscle in on our popularity. And I was like, no, I'm not going to try and come in on your videos. I'm here to see how all this goes down, and I'm here to build relationships. And that's why now that with lockdown laws and stuff, that I'm able to jump on Messenger or whatever and just say, and it's usually a really short, sharp message. Hey man, hope you're well. So-and-so's just invited himself on my show and suggested you might want to come on too. You got time? Yep. And it's funny. Yep. The big guys, that's all it takes. They're just like, sure, what time? I've done the same thing to a couple of local people and just got attitude back from them.
Yeah. It's, they're
not building the relationships. They're not building the relationships, with the right people.
One of the, and I hate to say what I'm about to say, but one of the reasons why I had fervor with leaving Australia, especially within for delving into the entertainment industry, there's this tall poppy syndrome in Australia, and it's very it's venomous, right? Yeah. There's nothing wrong with being proud of who you are and what you do. Nice.
I was just holding that up on my little side there. That's my coffee cup. No bad days.
Hell yeah. But there's, I feel like people's confidence gets blown and buried, especially in places like Australia, where there's this, oh, you think you're better than me. That kind of ethos or that ideology, it gets so misconstrued and then gets turned into things like that, where people think they're holier than thou, and like, oh, far be it from me to be a part of your, like, what? That's just ridiculous. I'm sorry you have to deal with that stuff, but it's insane.
It's funny, mate, that you say that about the tall poppy thing. The first person that noticed me, I actually thought I'd get into doing the YouTube thing and I'd have a couple of years of doing it before anybody would notice and I'd get confident with it. It was my third video that Jason McNamara, who is a guitar YouTuber from Australia, but he's based in Tokyo. Jason from Tokyo, I think he's called online these days. He's the only guitar YouTuber that's been to Eddie Van Halen's place to interview Ed. Jason saw my video, shared it with all the bigwigs, and then called me through Facebook. And I'm like, hi. And that was his thing. He was going, dude, you're on track. Being an Aussie, I'm going to give you a bit of advice. Tall poppy syndrome. Watch out for it. And one thing he told me was, you're going to know that you've done really good work when you show your friends, and this is just relating to Aussies as he saw it, and I've noticed the same thing. If they don't say anything, if they don't say, hey man, that's really good, blah, 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 if they just go, yes, you know you've done really good. It's just an Australian thing. They don't want to give you kudos, which is strange. It's really strange. I don't know why that is.
And see, the after effects of that they're almost infinite, right? Because then you're left to be somewhat, you're divided within your mind, within your consciousness. Like, well, am I horrible at this? Like, it becomes very difficult. I suffer from this. Like, I got very depressive in Australia trying to figure out, like, why aren't I getting any edgeway or even getting accepted within my peers? God, man, like, we got our record deal over here, and I went back to Australia for the first time to do immigration stuff. And I got to see a couple of friends, and sadly, the one guy that actually wanted some kudos from said, oh, well, you sold out, didn't you? And you left us all behind. I'm like, oh, fuck you, dude. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
And you know, if you're watching, you know who you are, dude.
Yeah. So, mate, back to the whole getting your music out there and everything.
Yeah.
Who should I be trying to form relationships with? Like, what kind of companies? Like, if you don't know, it's like, okay, who? What?
Yeah. I think the first port of call would be music publishers. I think, write down a list of from the A list all the way down to the almost unheard of. So I'm not so familiar with the Australian sort of geographical sort of elements of publishing out there. Like, the only people that I know are the people from Sony ATV or EMI or blah, 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 blah. Within the independent sort of structure, I think, Google is your friend. Search for music supervision licensing, search for music publishers, and, cold call them. Not like get on the phone, but, send out emails, tag them in it's one thing to say this, but it's also, don't go so guerrilla style that you become a nuisance to people.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's more important to say is actually this, and this is part of a much broader ideology. But at the end of the day, if what you're creating and what you're conjuring and coming up with is good and it hits a nerve, it's going to get discovered. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
It's almost, throwing caution to the wind, like putting yourself out there, not only by virtue of reaching out to companies, but put it out into the world, just people, the audience don't lie, and they smell bullshit a mile away. Yeah. And if they don't like it, they'll let you know, and listen to those people. I think the best platform right now is the ether, YouTube, SoundCloud, because trust me, I know music supervisors scour SoundCloud and YouTube on a daily basis.
Really?
Because, they're trying to find, so there's almost this bottleneck, right, where you've got, and this is what's happened to the major label industry, signing the same shit over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Because it works, right?
Yep.
Until it doesn't. And the music publisher is kind of that fulcrum in between, where they're the sort of gatekeeper of trying to find what's cool. The record company's trying to find what's cool, but the publisher has more of the finger on the pulse, right? Yeah. So publishers are in and of themselves trying to find the latest and greatest thing, and more often than not, you're going to find it on SoundCloud and it's on YouTube. You're going to see these numbers sort of a mass, I think so it's kind of a two-folded answer, because gone are the days where like the traditional publishing deal doesn't really exist anymore, and the traditional record deal doesn't really exist anymore, and nor should it, because we're more empowered now. We as artists have complete control. I think putting yourself out there to be discovered is one thing, and I think you can get a lot more from that, rather than trying to knock down doors trying to get discovered. And they display two totally different sets of communication, right? This sort of desperation comes off in a desperate way.
Yeah.
Fervor and confidence comes off in a much different way. And there's, you want to hang out with people who are the cool people, right? The ones who actually give light to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the ones that are trying to take the whole time, those are the ones you want to stay away from. So I guess it's this balance in between, I think from an ethical standpoint, you have to kind of be your own judge of whether, was 50 emails to, the same publisher this week, was that too much?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or could I have spent 50 hours on this one track that I just wanted to be the best that I could possibly make it, and then put it out into the world? Which is going to have the most efficacy?
Uh-huh. So, mate, when it comes to writing songs, I'm just going to backtrack on that question. With music syncs for picture, does that generally mean songs that you've already written? That doesn't mean actually the film directors give you music and then you write something to it. Is that a different thing?
Yeah, very, very. So, so hopefully you're starting to see how kind of very broad this space is, right?
Absolutely.
It's very, very broad.
Yeah,
and it's very, it's like with anything, 99% luck. The rest of it is like right place, right time.
Yep.
So for the way that I kind of fell into music licensing, and there's different kinds. So how do I explain this? So Memento, my band's like Tower 2.0, whatever it was.
Yep.
Signed to Columbia Records and EMI Music Publishing. We go make a record, and there's tours set up. And that's the live performance and merchandising and all that kind of stuff. That's one avenue. The other avenue, the silent one, is the music licensing one, where I think we had one of our songs that was going to be in a movie. And, as young as we were back then, we were like, wait, what? Oh, that's cool. And we get paid for that? And at that time, all of that kind of went over my head, like as far as the logistics of the finances are concerned, because I want to get into that aspect too. As a band signed to a label and we're out on tour and we have a record out, we're also getting music licensing on songs. And some of these songs weren't even singles. These were just deep cuts from the record. So there's that aspect, right? Where a music supervisor loves this record, loves a particular song, it resonated with them, they're working on a movie, and they want to place that in there because they just love the song. There's that aspect. Yep. Again, luck, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Then, so for cut to Digital Daggers, after Memento had split, Andrea and I, my partner in Digital Daggers, she and I we were writing songs for the next Katy Perry record and the next Kelly Clarkson record. So we're in a studio and we're writing songs, like literally we used to call them shots in the dark, because, Kelly wasn't coming down and Katy wasn't coming down. We're not in the room with Katy. We're writing songs for Katy. As you know, a large proportion of the music industry, there are what we kind of used to call ghostwriters, but they're not ghostwriters at all. You look at the liner notes and they're right there.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, so from a perspective of we're trying to write songs for radio for Katy Perry and Kelly Clarkson, out of frustration because Katy Perry took a left turn and she went in a totally different direction, and we had a whole bunch of these songs that are just now useless, right?
Yeah, right.
We were so frustrated, so we decided to start to write music for ourselves.
Okay.
Coming out of this sort of arduous, sort of like, consider a sweatshop somewhere in Vietnam or something, and we're churning out songs, right?
Yep.
You want to come up for some air, and you want to make music, creating music, fun again. So what happened was that we created this sort of style or genre of music that just, right time, right place, it just kind of filled a void of the, especially TV, like teen TV shows like Vampire Diaries and all those kinds of things, Pretty Little Liars. So it just kind of like, we didn't create those songs for those shows. Those songs just so happened to work for those shows.
Yeah.
Now that's scenario number 2. From scenario 2 brought me to scenario 3, where the very music supervisors that were supervising those TV shows would text me and call me up, and my person at Sony would call me up and say, "Hey, Space, we're working on this scene for this episode of whatever show is. We need a piece of music that would fill this in. We need a song. We want a new Digital Daggers song." There's one song just recently that went into, I think it was in one of the last few episodes of Orange is the New Black. It was a very pivotal scene. It was a suicide scene or something. It was a song that we wrote bespoke for, I think it was a TV show called The Originals, which was an offshoot of the Vampire Diaries.
Oh, yeah.
And it landed in that scene, and that song never got released because it didn't fit our cycle for a record, blah, 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 blah. Cut to 3-4 years later, that same very song gets placed into a massive TV show in a massive scene, and then suddenly you reap the rewards of the sort of marketing benefits of that because you're an artist. If I was just some guy who was making music for film and TV, you're kind of missing out on an entire other portion of revenue stream. And it goes back to that question of the music supervisor asking, is this an entity or is this just some person creating music? So I want to delve into that a little more because there's like the blanket music licensing aspect, and then there's this other aspect that's more bespoke for artists and artist-driven projects. So, like you have a song on a TV show, you better have it all set up so that by the time that TV show airs, it's available on iTunes, on Spotify. There's a lyric video made. You've got to have all your ducks in a row.
Yep.
And then suddenly you're making money and you're self-sufficient. You've just created another year or 5 years to create more content.
Yeah, there's a lot of work behind the scenes, isn't it? You mentioned lyric videos, and when I messaged you the other day about something, it was some odd hour, and you're like, "Oh man, I've just pulled an all-nighter. I've just been doing a lyric video and stuff," and people don't realize the behind-the-scenes thing that goes on.
Yeah. And it's not like, these aren't necessities. It's really up to the individual, and it's also your skill set as well, putting something up like a lyric video that's very, very basic and is not sort of married to the art of the music, to me seems like a waste of time. Like go take a camera outside and film some nature. At least that's a little bit more interesting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You kind of want to present a package as opposed to like, oh, here's this thing that I did.
Yeah. Mate, you mentioned like writing for Kelly Clarkson and Kerry Patey? Katy Perry. Kitty Perry.
Either or.
We just call it Bill.
So,
what other artists? Is there some other artists that we would have heard your work on? I know when I was at your place, there's a couple of records hanging up on the wall and everything. Yeah, is there some notable ones that you could sort of bring that we go, oh, really? You had a hand in that one?
Yeah. Most of the ones that there's a bunch of little ones. I was doing a lot of artist development where, and I would always get the cut too. I was the rock guy where my publisher would call me up and say, hey, we've got an artist coming in next week. Do you have time for a session? It's more of not do you have time. It's like, you're doing a session and you're writing songs.
Yep.
So, I'd be writing songs with artists that had just recently been signed to Wind Up Records from the Evanescence camps and all that kind of stuff. Seether is probably one of the sort of most notable ones. I co-wrote one of their number one hits. And
which one was that, mate?
Another track. A song called Fake It.
Okay, cool.
And another song which was actually an old song from the Tower days that never got ultimately recorded. It's a song called Waste. I believe it's the closing song on that Seether record.
Okay.
Song called Waste.
Yeah,
Candlebox, another great band. And just a bunch. Yeah. It's I don't know.
Do you get to a point where you forget? Like, because
yeah.
I quite often mention the studio legend Louis Shelton lives around the corner from me, and he quite often pops around. I give him a hand with video stuff or whatever. And I'll quite often say to him, like, hey, did you play on such and such? And he goes, I don't know. Wikipedia says I did. Because to them, like the way it was a job, and he'd go in and they just play a track before the artist got in. He didn't know who he was playing for. He just, play on that. And So did you always know which artist you were writing for at the time? Did they give you a bit of a background? We want this kind of vibe, or was it just we just want your style on this? How does that work?
A bit of both. Within the rock world, people there was a point in my life where post Memento, after my band had split up, I was like the go-to guitar player in LA. I had a buddy come and stay with me for a few weeks, or I think a couple of months, years back, and we got back from the airport for me picking him up, and on my answering machine is a voicemail of Barry Squire, who's an individual here in Los Angeles who places musicians in bands. And I think I had a message from, it was either Korn or it was I think it was the Korn thing, where it's Barry, like, hey, Space, just wondering, we want you to come down to the studio. Korn wants you to come down and be the second guitar player. We just want to try you guys out, blah, blah, blah. Like things like that were occurring. So I became sort of like the guitar guy, the rock guy. Yep. So when rock artists, still, this is in the 2000s,
yep.
When there were still rock bands, they would come into town. I was always one of the guys that would be on the top of the list to work with. Because it's like writing rock music. It's once you've been doing it for such a long amount of time, it becomes almost second nature. And I'm such a huge fan of pop, the sort of pop sensibility within rock songs. It's just, I just love huge, big choruses. So I'd always get the song on the record, But then sometimes the songs that you would write for an artist wouldn't get cut on the record, and then that song would then get thrown around, and it would land somewhere. An artist would love it. Like Kelly Clarkson wanted to record one of our Digital Daggers songs. But again, from a business standpoint, I couldn't get anyone to agree with me to tell me, like, well, is it going to be a single? Because if it's not going to be a single, then you're not getting the song. But, there's a negotiation aspect on the back end of things. It also helps not being green, too, because at that juncture, I'd already come from the major label sort of arena that I knew that, well, here's an opportunity. 10 years prior to that, I probably would have said, oh, yeah, no, Kelly Clarkson's going to record one of my songs. But then I would get kind of screwed on the back end as far as the negotiation sort of aspect of things. So there's a lot of, like, if you're writing for an artist today, like say for 21 Pilots, for example, if they were doing a co-write, there's all of these contingencies within the paperwork of, like, is there a guarantee it's going to be a single? Is there a guarantee it's going to be pushed in a certain way? How much money into marketing is going to go into the song? It's nuts. It's really quite crazy how intricate the business aspect of things are.
Yeah. So I'm starting to learn that about the guitar product demo game as well. When I do these live chats with people, people Skype me. I get them to come in at up to half an hour or so beforehand. Some people, I just shoot them a message, say, I'm here, man, anytime you want to connect. And so I'm always talking to them before the interview. A lot of the time, we rave for a good hour afterwards. Just seeing the business side and the deals and, like you're saying, there's certain big guys that have certain terms and stuff. And, well, okay, everyone's not allowed to release a video until this date, but hey, I'm numero uno. I get to release one 2 weeks beforehand, everybody else, and all this kind of shit. There's a lot of stuff. Legally, do you recommend that people sort of get good representation to suss this out? Because there's so many horror stories of people who have signed over their publishing or signed the first thing that came their way, and they're fucked. John Fogerty is the classic example of that for me.
Yeah.
I went and saw John play a few years ago when he was out here, and I saw his show firstly at the Entertainment Centre on his own. He had the best guitar sound I've ever heard in that place. It was amazing. I didn't realize how good he was, and I saw him a few days later at the Blues Fest. But as he was up there playing, a few songs into it, he kind of said, "Hey, so you probably heard that I've been pissed off with people owning my songs and I couldn't play my own songs. I'm here to tell you I'm finally over that. Let's play some of my music." So he got screwed royally. He got sued for releasing a song that sounded too much like himself.
Yeah.
Seriously, that song Old Man Down the Road, he got sued for it sounding too much like an old Creedence song, Green River, who someone fucked him over and owned the publishing on. So in terms of legal representation, it's a big thing, isn't it?
It's a massive thing. It's imperative, but it's not, right? The same sort of thing applies to management. I've been without a personal manager for quite some time. This is going to sound very bougie, right?
Yep.
And forgive me, it's hard to say, once you've lived here for almost 20 years and been in the midst of it, it's hard to kind of I still have the perspective of the layman, of the young up and coming, because I was once that person. So I understand and I sympathize. I'm so in the thick of it over here, so if I sound too bougie or what have you, my apologies.
I'm used to your douchiness, mate. That's okay.
So, having management, right? The biggest question, because management and having representation and an attorney are almost the same kind of thing in a weird way. I know that sounds very sort of compartmentalized, but it's not. A lot of attorneys are the ones who procure deals and make deals happen, not just the signing off and making sure that the verbiage is correct and written in such a way, but the procurement of said deals is very, a lot of it has to do with attorneys, because they're a community in and of themselves,
Yep.
It's very, I think it goes back to, one of the massive points that I really want to ramp home is self-sufficiency.
Yep.
I think at the end of the day, if you don't have to rely on an attorney or put one on as, on a retainer, because a lot of, music attorneys require a retainer, most of which just take a percentage of which, and that could be anywhere from 5 to 10%. 10% is asking way too much.
Yeah, totally.
Norm is 5. So if you have a great relationship with your music attorney and you've been entered into that circle, because it's very much this sort of circle of trust, you get introduced to certain people, and by virtue of that introduction, you've now been entered into this little circle, right? There's a lot of gatekeepers in this industry. But I feel like those walls are starting to break down in the advent of the internet, right?
Yeah.
As long as it's been around for quite some time now. I think young up and coming artists, are starting to recognize how empowered they are by virtue of the tools that they have. But again, going back to the self-sufficiency, if you understand how music publishing works, how licensing works, how record deals work. What is a standard record deal? What's a standard publishing deal? How much should you be earning on royalty rates and all that kind of stuff as far as streaming is concerned? All those things apply. And yes, it helps to have someone there to guide you, but most attorneys are not there to guide you. They're there to extrapolate 5% of your revenue stream.
Yeah.
Same as management. You know, if a manager has your best interest, then they will guide you throughout, and they will empower you with the knowledge that you need to know as an artist. I know a lot of managers that like to draw that proverbial line in the sand and keep their artists completely out of the loop whilst coddling the information. An artist. Artists should be educated. They should, every single person that plays a guitar, writes a song, dabbles on a keyboard, is a producer, a mixer, what have you, know it all.
Yeah.
At least little bits of it.
Yeah. So that's one thing with you. It's really funny, mate. Like when we played together, both in rival bands and in the same band for a little bit. And then, you know, you went to the States and stuff. When we reconnected later, we both kind of went down very similar paths in learning how to produce records ourselves, things like that. So it is a very multifaceted game, isn't it? Like you're expected to be able to mix your own stuff these days, because let's face it, and this is one thing that fucking shits me, top tier mix engineers, if you are a signed artist, charge $10,000 a fucking song. I reached out to somebody, a big name when I did my album, and as an unsigned artist, they said, yeah, $3K a song. And when people come and ask me to do a record, it's like, okay, cool, we're going to mix this now. We're like, what, you want me to pay you to mix? It's like, okay, so you're going to go and compare my work to people who charge 10K, and I'm talking Australian dollars, 10K work, and you don't want to pay me at all for mixing. It's a part of the process, and it's a specialized thing, and good day to you, sir.
Yeah. Well,
so,
you know,
how did you learn? How did you learn how like, I know I went down a path. Nine Inch Nails, man, for me, I saw Nine Inch Nails live in 95, and it was at a big festival. They were the headliners, and they had people like Tool and it was a huge lineup. Alternative Nation. When Nine Inch Nails came out, man, that fucking sound, I just went, why did everybody else just sound like a bad outdoor gig? And these guys came on, and it sounded like a fucking huge home stereo system. And that took me down the rabbit hole of production, sampling, synthesis. I was always into synthesizers. I started out playing keyboards. How did you get into it, man? How did you get all the chops in the studio?
Yeah. Great question. Yeah, I was at that show.
Mate, I'm going to walk off and make myself a coffee while you're answering that, because the kitchen's just there and I can still hear you. So in case you think I'm being rude, awesome. I'm still listening.
That was a fantastic show. Okay, so that's such okay, let me sort of take all of these thoughts. I think it's out of necessity ultimately. So having gone through the process of getting the record deal, Memento, myself and three other gentlemen here were constantly doing these showcases to get a record deal. Thankfully, we had a lot of interest from all of them. And there was a point in time where we were going back and forth from LA to New York, and we're, doing all these showcases in these massive, there's a facility called SIR here in the States, and they have this massive facility in New York. Actually, I met Sting there at the drink machine one day when we were doing a showcase.
Cool.
Bass guitar, massive big black sort of trench coat, very nice, young looking. Like the guy looks fucking amazing.
Yeah. That's what 5 hours of tantric sex will do to you.
Exactly.
Sting
Exactly.
knows.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone should know. Um, so, by virtue of going back and forth and doing all of these showcases and meeting with all these different label executives, right? We got to meet like Gary Gersh, who signs Nirvana, came down and we did a showcase for him.
Cool.
At that point, it becomes sort of very secondary. It's very innate. You do your showcase, you play your show, and then the most important part of that meeting is the sit down and discussion after you performed. And so you're meeting with all these different A&R people, right? This will circle back to answer your question.
Yep.
So I was always intrigued by budgeting. Like, how much is it going to cost to make a record? How much is it going to cost? What do producers ask for? What their fees are? And again, you have to recognize this was in like 2001, 2002. So back in those days, there were still exorbitant budgets for records. So from my vantage point, I started to piece together all of these, like I'd read about it in magazines and whatever magazine or press that I could find at the newsagent about music creation in the grand scope of things. Here I suddenly am in the thick of it, and I'm getting firsthand knowledge from Toby Wright, who's an amazing friend of mine who's done some amazing records. Along the way, I've learned so many like little bits and pieces from him, just from texting or hanging out or drinking too much together.
Yeah. And it's about that, isn't it? Like picking your friends' brains. Not teach me, but let's just exchange ideas.
Exactly. And that's why things like this, what you and I are doing right now, are so important. It's to share, like, I don't generally talk about this stuff. Like the stuff that this stuff I talk about with my peers. Like if I'm hanging out with another producer or my A&R guy, we talk about this stuff all the time because we're constantly sharing experiences and whatnot so that we can learn from all of them. So to answer your question, how did I get to having to be the pianist, the keyboard player, the synth guy? I'm sound designing on analog synths. Like I'm a guitar player. Yeah. I was in a rock band. I'm a guitar player. But suddenly now I'm a string arranger. I play piano pretty okay. I do all these different things. I think I've just always had that sort of yearning to learn more, and I just want to be able to do everything. I just hate relying on other people, and that's the one thing that I started to see this sort of common ground within making a record. Like we spent $2.5 million making a record, and then that's within one cycle, right?
And then you got to recoup that before you make a fucking cent.
Then you got to recoup that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, which clearly we did not. But sadly, we signed. I think we signed like a 5-album deal, or at least it was at least a 3-album deal. We could have that project should have stayed together. It's out of necessity, right? So, having gone through somewhat of it became arduous at the end of the day. Being in a band with 4 totally different personalities. That's one massive caveat that I think that's probably why there's not a lot of bands these days.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to be.
Why put yourself through that nonsense?
No one wants to work with a fuckwit.
No, exactly. And even whether they're an asshole or a fuckwit, it's maybe they're just on a totally different trajectory, and that's their trajectory. And far be it from anyone else to try to steer them in a totally different direction. You know what I mean? There's also that as well. But yeah, to answer your question, it was out of necessity. Like after Memento had kind of displaced, I took a meeting with my A&R guy at our publisher, EMI, and I said to his name is Matt Messer, great A&R guy. He'd signed Blink-182,
cool.
System of a Down, like some really great artists. And I asked him, hey man, so what do I have to do to transition from guitar player in a band? I just wrote a bunch of songs on that album. It's my album. It's our album. How do I do that for other people? And he gave me a shot. And then seriously, within 6 months, I had my first cut on my first record. It was amazing. So I think it really has to do with your ability to learn fast, and your hunger to learn, I think. And you have to be humbled. You're going to make so many fucking mistakes, but you're meant to, because you got to learn from those mistakes.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because I found, like, trying to learn to mix, and I'm not that good at mixing, but there's just not many good people around this area. But
I would beg to differ, my friends.
Oh, really?
I've
Thank
heard
you, mate.
Yeah. No, I think see, can I just add?
Yeah.
I think the most important parts because mixing is so integral to songwriting and production as well. It's if you can do all of it and not have to rely on anyone else, you're going to have the best version of your vision anyhow. But I think music appreciation should be the number one priority on every songwriter's list. And what I mean by that is that it's a very broad stroke. What a precision bass sounds like, understand what a Fender Strat sounds like, understand what a cello sounds like, understand what an upright piano sounds like as opposed to a baby grand. So like all those little elements, how to get the most killer snare that sounds synthetic but has elements of acoustic, organic to it. All of these little bits and pieces are ultimately going to fall into the one space and where you're going to have the ability to create exactly what you want to create. It's like, you don't wear your shoes out and about without tying your shoelaces. So you have to learn how to tie your shoelaces first.
Yeah.
Totally.
Mate, through being involved with all these publishing companies and stuff, do you sort of have your eye on potential artists out there that you might go, hey, hey, so-and-so company, check out this person, they do well. Do you see those kinds of artists, but then often see people making really simple mistakes that are cheapening their brand? Because I know I do.
Yeah.
I know I do. And I'm just like, oh, how can you have spent that much money on putting together a product you're trying to shop to record companies, but then if that record company was to Google you and say, cool, what's this person doing? Oh, they're playing at a local pub to 3 people. There's no exclusivity about that. iPads on mic stands and you're reading the lyrics is another thing. I'm going, well, no, that's you've just cheapened the brand there. What's some common things that you see that you think?
It literally runs the gamut of all of that.
Yeah.
Times 10. Like, so, I stopped going out. Like, there was a point in time where I was involved in going out to see artists, and, I'm hanging out with my A&R guy, or, the last real good show that I actually really saw, dude, was, I got to see Royal Blood's first show in LA at the Roxy.
Cool.
I had no idea what or who they were. My A&R guy calls me up and he's like, hey man, what are you doing tonight? I'm like, nothing. Do you want to come out and see a show? I'm like, sure. Who's playing? It's like Royal Blood. I'm like, wow, sounds fucking terrible. Because immediately my mind goes to like, Royal Blood. It sounds like, something that, we did Ozfest already. That was, as fun as that was, waking up to that every day is kind of horrendous. So I'm like, yeah, cool. I'm going out to the Roxy tonight. I'm going to go see this band. Within 5 minutes of them coming on stage, just absolutely blown away. And of course, I'm the guy that's standing there thinking, dude, there's track. There's got to be there's track running here. There's track. There's like, so I'm sitting here listening to like supported elements that are running on tape in the background. It's just a live 2-piece, absolutely phenomenal. They run a whole ton of track nowadays, but that's a whole different story.
It's pretty common practice now, though, isn't it?
You have to keep up with the Joneses. So yeah, to circle back, I went out to we have the regular events here in LA at certain clubs. They're goddamn, dude, it reminds me of the 80s. What it would have been. I can imagine this is what it was like in the 80s here, but now, like, well, no longer now because that shit live shows aren't happening, and I don't think they're coming back anytime soon.
Yeah, that's a shame.
Yeah, it's a huge shame. But what was happening was that these promoters were putting on these bills, and these are, it's a typical sort of the situation where, you would never hear of this happening in on the Gold Coast or anything like that. There's just not enough artists, and there's not enough commerce to draw. I don't believe. But here in LA, you've got maybe 5 to 10 artists, and they're all of a broad spectrum of genres. But all of these cats are like, they've either had a song on a TV show recently, they've co-written a song on someone else's record, but they're embarking on their own solo career. It's a lot of solo artists, a lot of female, driven kind of stuff. I at the end of the day, I think there's too much of it. There's way too much of it, and I think what's happening and what we're seeing happen, especially now, given the circumstances globally, that the cream is rising to the top and all the rest is just literally dying off and falling by the wayside, and rightfully so. Because when I go out to those sort of, they're like live showcases, right? I'm in a room full of, let me put it this way. If you're playing locally in Los Angeles, you're catering to only one aspect, and that is the music industry. It's not a fan-driven place. It's an industry. It's an entertainment town. Unless you're not going to see a real show, unless you're going down to LA Live or the Forum or a real venue. If you're going to, I don't want to name venues, but if you're going to one of those places that are hosting those nights of multiple songwriters or what have you, in the hopes that you're going to help this budding career or get another song on a TV show, I found that it's too much of the same, and everyone's trying to do the exact same thing, and so it's overwhelmingly oversaturated. So nothing really sticks out. I would actually much rather see a young kid on stage with a laptop and nothing else, and just own it. Just be themselves and just give me the best performance that you've ever done in your entire life. But be good,
Yeah. What do you think about people trying to jump onto whatever the latest music trend is? Because I asked this, I remember years ago when ska was a big thing. Somebody saying to me, I'm going to start a ska band. And I said, you're too late. No, but it's huge. And I said, yeah. Those bands have been playing ska and refined it, and that became the big thing, and they went looking for it. That's what they play. You're going to try and play that, and it's too late. By the time you get good at it, the next big thing is going to come along, right?
I saw a lot of that on the Gold Coast. Like, I think that's probably why, like, my band Tower at the time, like, we were doing our own thing. Like, we didn't really adhere to, like, I was a Nirvana fan. Justin was a U2 fan. Stewie was more of a Helmet fan. But we all loved Alice in Chains. But we all loved that sort of era. But I was a Police fan. I love Elton John. You have to have an eclectic sort of broad taste for music. I noticed a lot of bands throughout that era were especially when Korn came about on the scene.
Yeah.
Did you notice that? It was just like there wasn't anything like this, and then suddenly there was 20 bands that were literally Korn ripoffs.
Absolutely. What was I doing at the time? I was making Prodigy style music before the Prodigy got huge.
Yeah, man. No, seriously, like I remember, it's funny. I'm glad that you introduced me to Marilyn Manson, because like I was having lunch with the guy every single day when we were on Ozfest together.
Yeah.
Very intelligent man, amazing.
So I hear.
But you were literally the first person that turned me on to, what was that record where on the cover he's in
Mechanical Animals.
Mechanical Animals.
Yep.
This is right about the time that you had put Skateboard together and were delving into that genre of music. No one else was doing that. There was it was more, that was more of a European blend sound, which, yeah. So I don't mean to go off on random tangents, but to answer your question, I I think it's cheap. I think if you're going to mimic someone or try to copy or emulate, use it as an educational tool. I think, especially from, well, yeah, from a broad sense, as a songwriter, from an instrumentalist standpoint, as a guitar player, like Jimi Hendrix was my thing, and then it went from Jimmy to Satriani to Vai, and then Cobain. So I refined, got very technical until I just threw it all away and became more me than any of that stuff. But you want to take like little elements from all of those things, and I think that applies to everything today. Like I constantly like to have pop radio on, but alternate pop. Like things like 21 Pilots to like they still play Nirvana from time to time. There's a lot of great production skills that are happening today where, like, I hate to say this, I'm not a huge fan of him as an artist, but there's an artist called Youngblood, which some of the songs I love and I really enjoy. They're very pop, super pop, but there's this angst to it. It almost seems as if it's a little bit too forced, and I think that's why I don't like it.
Yeah.
But as far as the production is concerned, it sounds like a band, but it doesn't. It's like 21 Pilots is a classic example of, this is a two-piece, a drummer and a bass player and a vocalist. But on the record, you can run the gamut from punk rock to super pop to urban in the middle. And I think no one should be afraid of experimentation, So when you're trying to emulate someone, I think it's hard to gone are the days where if you're going to emulate Sublime or Nirvana, you're way late in the game. Like people are mashing that stuff together now, and that's the new industry. I want to hear 5 songs in one song, and everything better be a hook. That's my expectation.
Yeah. You're very good at writing hooks, man. Like I've heard a few little projects that you've had going last year, or was it, you had something going where it was a 2-piece with you and somebody else, but then the singer bailed and you did all the vocals yourself. And I heard a copy of that. I'm just like, that's space singing. That's fucking cool.
It's one thing. Like this, I do pride myself on one thing, and I think I don't believe I've hit my stride yet, and that I don't mean to sound cocky or anything like that at all. I've spent so much time sort of in behind the curtain, which I love. I much prefer that. But it's now that I've kind of picked up all of these skill sets along the way. Now I have because that record comes out in a few months from now, where I'm actually fronting this thing and I'm singing and I'm playing bass. It's bass in this, just bass, drums, and myself and vocals. It's a lot of fun, and at this point, dude, I really don't give a shit. And I think that's one of the most important. One of my managers said to me about a year or two ago, it was great advice. And Mark, if you're watching, thank you. He said, just don't care. The moment you start caring less, things will start to shift. There was a lot of PTSD kind of stuff that I was dealing with from, being kind of screwed over on some songs and going through the record label thing. And I've gone through publishers and all that kind of stuff. It can weigh on your shoulders. And if you let it affect you, it can be dangerous, very, very dangerous, not only to yourself, but to the people around you. But the proverbial penny finally dropped, and I realized, you know what? I don't care. I'm just going to do it.
Do you feel that having your music placed through digital daggers, etc., that having that affords you the freedom to not give a fuck and create other music on the side? That, hey, if I actually knuckle down and do this as I'm expected, that means that affords me more time to do whatever the fuck I want. Is that how it works for you?
Yeah, that's the big sort of caveat with all of this, is that I'm in a very interesting sort of position in which I've afforded myself this luxury of being able to do whatever it is whenever I want. But I mean, having said that, that doesn't come without its hard work, and it's, it took me a long time just to it wasn't until about probably 2013, like, it's one thing to sign a multi-million-dollar record deal and publishing deals and all that kind of stuff, and money generating. There's a lot of people that get paid before you do.
Yeah.
The attorneys, the management, and the splits between the labels and publishers and all that kind of stuff. It's hard to keep your head above water. When you do, and hopefully if you go through this sort of arduous process, you learn a couple of things along the way. You kind of learn how to at least wade until you can just completely just bathe.
Yeah. So you mentioned just about all the splits and everything. Now, a term that gets thrown around a lot that I don't think people are very clear on is points. If somebody says, I help you on that, it's for X points. Do you want to explain to people what that actually means?
Yeah. So 1 point is 1%.
Yeah. Okay.
1%,
Cool.
Yeah.
Of the actual songwriting, or
so that's, well, it's determined. So, and this is what's so great. This is what's amazing about the music industry, is that what you're dealing with is intellectual property, right? So going back to the self-sufficiency, myself, I record my own masters. So I have my own studio down in Chinatown. I record everything there. Sometimes I mix there. Basically, I have a finished product that's mine, and I didn't pay anyone else to help out in any sort of way. Now, this master recording is mine, but I also co-wrote the song, or if it's a song that I wrote myself. So I own 100% of the master and 100% of the publishing. If I'm within, so let's just say it's a co-write, right? So let's take Digital Daggers as an example. I like to be very, very fair, and I like to split things straight down the middle. If the workflow is balanced, so that both parties are actually pulling their weight, right? So in a great hypothetical situation, both parties are sharing it equally because they're putting equal amounts of work in.
Yep.
So on the master side, within publishing and releasing a song and licensing. So let's say, so the quick answer to your question is 1.1%. If you're a producer, usually a producer would say, if I'm working with an artist, I'm going to take 5 points.
Is that a typical split? 5 points?
Well, it's a good place to start, because I'm anticipating that person's going to come back and say, well, we can allocate 2. And then I will say, well, I can go as low as 3. It's a negotiational sort of aspect of things. Yep. And you come to an agreement as to wherever you come to, and that's, I don't think anyone's really obligated at this point. I don't think that there's a standard number anymore, because the playing field is rapidly changing. And again, to urge people to be more self-sufficient, that's less points and less percentages that you're going to have to share with other people. But traditionally, in a songwriting aspect, I like to split it right down the middle. From a legal standpoint, I've seen a lot of singers kind of bring this up, like, legally, it's lyric and melody. I'm like, yeah, that's great, but it's 2020 or it's 2015 or it's 2010. We live in different times, and still, that would hold up, but it's not. It's just not how things really work these days. So I like to split everything 50-50. So if we were to have a song from Digital Daggers get placed in a TV show, Sony ATV would then negotiate the rights of licensing between, say, it's an ABC TV show. So ABC and my people at Sony, they negotiate a deal, and then they present that deal to us. We either approve it, or if I would usually say, hey, let's throw in another 5 or another 10K there.
Yeah,
I've gotten away with that many a time. Now I just don't even bother. It's like I don't really care. Cool, that's amazing. the long-term effects of having a song in a TV show that's going to hit, millions and millions of people is far greater than the immediate sort of payout that you would get, but traditionally, and full disclosure, like there was some cases where you'd be making like $20,000 to $40,000 in one sync, and that's for 30 seconds of your music in a TV show. Yeah, it's
now,
insane,
folks,
right?
I'm just going to stop you there. Did you hear what Jason just said there? Everyone is bitching about streaming and how little the artist receives, and that's why I wanted to bring Jason on here to talk about music syncing and etc. Because did you just hear that fucking figure? That screw your streaming, sink or swim, baby.
Well, I'll go you one even further, and again, like I usually try to preface it. People who know me personally here know this is just who I am. It's not about, I'm not like throwing around numbers to say, hey, look at me, blah, 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 blah. It's, for me, it's full disclosure so that other people can understand that there are opportunities there that are real, and they're there for anyone and everyone. We had a song that was running in a Ferrero Raffaello TV spot, like, the chocolates, right?
I'm glad you can say that. Say that again.
So it aired. You probably never had seen it. It never aired here. It aired in Brazil, United Arab Emirates, Italy, and like maybe 2 or 3 other regions, like global regions. But nonetheless, it wasn't in the US or Australia or anything like that. We ended up renegotiating that because we did yearly deals. So every 12 months, that if they wanted to reuse that ad, that we had to renegotiate that.
Cool. So I was going to ask you about that. Is it an ongoing thing? So as you get reruns of things, that means more money in your pocket again?
It can, especially when it comes to commercial use, like ad spots. With the TV shows, they tend to not, they want to do it in perpetuity. That's become a very ubiquitous thing now. Like, gone are the days where, if you're Drake, that's a totally different story. But if you're me and they want to use one of your songs in a TV show, I kept asking until the point where even my publisher said that's just how it rolls these days.
Yep.
What that means is that that license for that particular episode, that's in perpetuity, but the back end stuff, whether it's ASCAP or APRA in Australia, your PRO, your performing rights organization, is going to pay you out royalties based upon performance, like streaming royalties, like residuals. That every time that all these shows are on Netflix and Hulu and blah 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 blah, it just keeps rolling in. That money will never ever go away. The more people watch those shows, and if you're lucky and fortunate, see, this is the beautiful thing is that it all translates into streaming. I have an entity that most people probably have never heard of, but yet you probably heard one of my songs in one of these shows that you probably watched and not recognized who it is because it's so far under the radar. There is a massive amount of fans that we have for this one project, to the point where we're bringing in a considerable amount of money on a yearly basis, and that's because either people are just watching one of the shows now, like maybe they just started watching How to Get Away with Murder, and they've heard this one song and they want to find out who it is, and then suddenly they've just bought all of your records and now they're streaming all of your songs. It's all an exponential growth. Does that kind of make sense? So again, totally. The streaming aspect thing, like when Spotify first became a thing, I remember sort of playing with it to the point where, because we were still doing digital releases, meaning that you had to buy it, whether it be a la carte or purchase the record. So you'd be getting a premium of income from that purchase of the record against streaming. And people like Taylor Swift and Coldplay and big artists do this all the time. If you release a record, don't make it available on Spotify. If you have any sort of monicum of a fan base or awareness out there and some traction, use that to your advantage. Don't ever fail from being a business person. I would offer that record for digital download only first for maybe the first 2 or 3 months, or maybe even the first week. You'd be surprised if you have enough fans. People will buy that if they want it, because they want it now, even though it's going to be streaming in a month or two from now. But then give an incentive. Well, maybe the streaming version has 2 additional tracks in a live version.
Yeah.
Maybe this one, you know what I mean? There's so many different ways that you can really extrapolate.
It's strange times for musicians. I mean, we've had that side of things through record sales, etc., pulled out from under us, and now we can't play anywhere. So I have seen a lot of people doing the streaming thing, and I think that's starting to sort out the men from the boys. Don't want to sound sexist by using that term, but it's the first thing. Go, mate.
You mean streaming? You mean streaming as far as like performing live?
Yeah. There's a lot of people at home. Yeah, so doing it. So I watched Steve Vai. He's got some great things going down. I totally caught him out that his live performances weren't live; they were pre-recorded. Just like a local group I know who are going live on Sunday. No, you pre-recorded it yesterday or the day before. There's some people. Paul Kelly, I saw him just turn on a thing, and it was just captivating. It was just like, you don't need tricks, man. You're just fucking the shit. And then I've seen other people, and I was talking to Scott Kahn from Kids in the Kitchen the other couple of weeks ago about this, and we were having a conversation. We were going blah, 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 blah. And then we both said at the same time, in referral to all these people streaming, cheapening their brand. And I think it is kind of sorting out. When you go see someone live, you're baffled by volume, and stuff, and you start to see, maybe they're not as good as what I thought. And then there's other people you go, oh my God, you don't need any studio trickery or anything. You're just you're just gifted. Yeah.
So it's so very divided. Like I've worked with some artists that have come into my studio, and my job is to co-write a song and at least produce a listenable demo by the end of that day, or at least the next day when I go in there without the artist. But I've worked with some people that have been, rather undesirable as far as their talent is concerned, but yet they just signed a massive record deal, and I've got to write a song for them, right? I started to understand very, very quickly, and this is no disrespect to any of those people, because for one, kudos to them for the fact that they got exactly what they needed to provide for them to create their art. As a guitar player, I started to recognize, because I prided myself on my ability to play. Like, I wanted to be somewhat of a virtuoso within my instrument. I wanted to know it so well that not only impress other people, because I want to be an entertainer within that light, but also impress myself, to keep furthering my ability. Gone are the days of which that I think the fame and the fortune and the recognition has become priority to the fundamental of music. Now, that used to piss me off a lot, because that I took it personally, but never take anything personally. Far be it from me to be pissed off because someone else didn't do their own due diligence and their own hard work and be good at what they're supposed to be doing, or at least what they're selling themselves off to be. I think take away all of that, and I think that's where we're at now. I think the new artists are the ones that are behind the screen, and it's funny you bring up that, like, there's, like you just said before, there's an artist that is going to go on live, but they pre-recorded it, right?
Yep.
You take a look at anything that Trent Reznor has done as live material, and it's, like, you can hear, like, dude, you're not playing that on your right hand.
Yep.
Wait, I still hear this thing happening. Like, it's all about packaging that, and I think there's this fine line, right, between, because, like, you and I know best because we're instrumentalists and we pride ourselves on our ability to play our instruments. But there's that fine line of hey, we're the first ones that are going to point out and say, no, 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 you're not doing that. That's not what
Yeah,
you're playing.
totally,
That's
totally.
auto-tune.
Yep.
But I think throwing that out the window is probably the best thing that we can do. As sad as that is to say, because I think people should have pride within themselves and their abilities first and foremost, and then package yourself. It's not like Trent Reznor isn't talented, but he packages himself in such a way so that it's, there are imperfections there that only he wants you to hear.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's common practice now to run tracks to recreate the sound of the record, and that's been happening for a long time. I did a gig probably about 5 years ago now. It was the last show I ever did with the Queen show that I was in, and we played this huge show with Icehouse, and we were told not to try and meet Ivor Davies because he's a very private person, but no, it turns out he was a huge Brian May fan, and he tracked me down and just cornered me and was just picking my brains about my rig and everything. But therefore I picked their brains, and I was like, so I heard I was hearing little bits of percussion like in Great Southern Land. My international viewers probably don't know Icehouse or these, but these guys are an institution over here, right?
I just watched that music video the other day, like
so
3 days ago.
Little clicks, like little percussion, the little clave sounds and stuff. And it was all on track. And because I asked, you guys running tracks? And they said, man, we've been running tracks since 85 86. Or something. Yeah, the drummer told me he joined in like 85 or something, and they were running tracks since then. So it's pretty common practice. Even down, man, I was talking to Sankey about this a while ago. People probably might know John Sankey, who's another Gold Coast guy, went over to LA and stuff, and similar story to yourself.
Great drummer.
Yeah. So when I played with guys from Fear Factory and all that kind of thing, he was in Devil You Know, right? Yeah. What were they called before? They had a bit of a name change, didn't they? No, they've changed the name to Burn the Flag, Raise the Flag or something now. But Devil You Know. I was quizzing him about some stuff, about running tracks and everything. And he told me what he's got running in his cans live is a click, and he's got the guitar parts from the album playing. He's listening to that. He's not listening to the guitar playing live. He's playing along to the fucking guitar parts from the record in case old mate over here is having a shocking night. It's not going to affect him. Yep. He's playing along to the fucking record.
Most definitely.
So can you just talk about running tracks and stuff? And I warned you about this, that I'm going to be constantly drinking coffee, and I'm going to just have a bathroom break while you explain to people. But can you explain to people how people are going about pulling off having tracks running live these days? Because I know you had quite a cool rig going on a couple of years ago that you showed me. So
yeah. There's a multitude of different ways to do it. And, I used to... I'm going to shut this window real quick. Excuse me for 1 second. It's an imperative part of live performance these days, and it used to pay me to say this. Even so when we were on Ozfest, I won't say which band it was. Very massive, well-known band. And it kind of broke my heart for a second because I would stand side of stage and I'd watch them perform. This is like in front of 40, 50,000 people, what have you, every day. And it's the same show every day. And I'm hearing all these additional guitar parts. I'm hearing harmonies that aren't happening. People it's choreographed so much so that, they're changing from, different sides of the stage on key every single night at every point in it, every song. And I, when they got off stage, I think we went out to dinner all together one night, and I asked, be careful, I'm not going to mention any names. I asked the drummer, hey man, so you guys are obviously running tracks, why? Why? And he explained it to me, and the singer, I wish I could name this, I don't know why I'm withholding, but he explained it to me in such a way that he said, look, the punter is the most important person in the venue every single night, and you want to give them exactly what they want to hear, and that is ultimately putting the CD in their home entertainment system and listening to that. And by the time that they get to the show, they're hearing that in their heads anyhow. So the closer that you can be to that, the better. And again, like I've watched, bands even here locally and even on large tours with, save for maybe a handful of bands like, say, Royal Blood, for example. But there's such a massive difference between the band that's not running tracks, that just sounds like a high school band, and then you've got the full, even if it's just a stereo track, of just little ancillary things that are supporting everything, it's going to sound so much better. So there's so many different ways to do this from a technological standpoint. The old way used to be running DAT tape, but with
Tapes
vibrations.
chew. Tapes chew.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yep.
Oh boy. And
Yep.
massive vibrations can screw that stuff up
Yep.
as well. Then came the laptop era. Hard drives with plate spinning hard drives. No bueno.
Yep.
So cut to now we've got what I use is the SBDSX.
Oh, cool.
Which is it's a drum pad. So I'm not running cues. I don't have time for that. I've got a myriad of other things that I need to be playing and whatnot. Drummer is going to take care of that, of course, because he's the one who controls time. So why not have this on a pad system? And then if you're smart enough, you can, connect everything into MIDI and control lighting, control all sorts of different things. But I would suggest any young musician who's trying to run sort of backing track kind of stuff, kill two birds with one stone by purchasing something that's also going to be playable, but
That's
also
a good
have,
idea. Great
and
idea.
they're relatively cheap.
I got to bring up some fails that I've seen with backing tracks, and one of them, and I learnt this the hard way, and this was in Scaphoid that you played with me in. So just to explain, that was pretty much, I'm like you, a multi-instrumentalist, and I just recorded everything myself, and then I'd just get a couple of mates to come and play live. I was running a 4-track mini disc player, the old Yamaha ones. So I assigned 2 tracks to the stereo elements. I assigned 1 track to bass. I had my friend Sharpie playing either bass or rhythm guitar, depending on what the song needed at the time. If we had synth bass, he'd play rhythm guitar. And then I had another track of just all the percussion elements, so I could feed four to the front of house. Then I had that also generated MIDI timecode, not MIDI clock. It was set, so I'd put in clock, and then I had a drum machine synced to that via MIDI cable for the drummer. So he was listening to it, just a drum machine, and he could adjust that to whatever he wanted. We talked about tapes chewing and stuff. Now, you mentioned the Rose and Crown. At the Rosie one night, I had my little rig. I just had this little case that I'd opened up, and here we go, ready to go. Vibrations. I had it on the thing. As soon as the kick drum started coming in, it made the mini disc jump, and it would jump to a different part of the song. And we're playing, and then all of a sudden, the drummer would just and sort of jump time slightly, and I'm hearing the track going, what the fuck? And after it happened a couple of times, my mate who was doing front of house ran down and put something under the rig to stop the vibration. So that was a monumental fail. CD, when I was playing for Tony Lee Scott, who was a solo artist signed to Sony back in 2000. I'm going to talk about how I got that gig too. I'll just write that down because that was an interesting story. But with Tony, he was Sony's big Australian artist they were trying to push at the time, and Leah Haywood was the female. And we'd tour around a lot. I say tour. For pop artists, there's a lot of promo stuff that goes on that people probably aren't aware of, where you're doing performances in boardrooms of radio stations and shopping centres and the like. There was a huge fucking shopping centre in Melbourne, multi-level. I don't know Melbourne that well. It could have been like a Westfield or something like that. And Leah she was like a solo female with 2 backing dancers basically, and they were just running CDs. And then there was a scratch on her CD, and she went to do her big single, and we get to a point and skip. Oh, let's just try that again. Got to the same place. It's like, oh fuck! I hope you guys brought it back up. I can't remember if they did or not, but that was another monumental fuck up that I saw. Then there's the Ashley Simpson incident, isn't it? That buried her career on live TV.
Oh, dude.
They pressed play on the wrong fucking song.
That was an interesting situation. I was at a wedding here in Beverly Hills. It was my A&R guy's wedding at the time. So you can imagine, like, this wedding was like a $350,000 wedding, right? It's ridiculous. Walking into the place at the Beverly Hills Hotel or wherever the hell this place was, there's rose petals all over the place. There was an instrumental band just playing Radiohead songs, but in this jazz sort of way. It was very bizarre. But later on that night, if you can imagine, like, here's one of these bigwigs from EMI Music Publishing, and you've just got, like, anyone who's anyone in the music industry is at this wedding. I got corralled later that evening because the Ashley Simpson thing had just happened. I think it was like 2 days prior. Oh, because I had flown. I was actually on tour. I was on tour with Kevin from Candlebox. We were touring through the States, and my guitar tech did the last 2 shows for me because I wanted to fly home and be at this wedding for my bro, my A&R guy. And later that evening, I get accosted by like 5 very reputable, great people in the music industry that are begging me to be Ashley Simpson's new guitar player because of this instance.
Oh, really? Did everyone split? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, God. And I literally, I'm kind of bummed I said no. Because, coming from being in a rock band, that whole element of the industry, and then suddenly, my next gig's going to be Ashley Simpson. Retrospectively, I wish I had taken that because it probably only would have lasted 6 months anyhow, because that tour only lasted 6 months, and I think she only did maybe one other record after that. But yeah, anyway, sorry.
Yeah, that's
note.
One way to, being caught out like that. So, I mean, there's using it to mime and hide the fact that you don't have the chops to pull it off live. I'm gonna say something here. When I worked at Apple, there was a guy that worked, and he was maybe 10 years younger than me, but he had lived in the States for a little while. He's an Aussie guy, and he toured with Air Supply.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah. So, and he told me about running the tracks. There's 2 singers. There's the guy who plays left-handed guitar and sings, which, Link, if you're still watching, for some reason when I see Air Supply, the left-handed guitar player dude just reminds me of you, Link. That's weird. But the little guy, from what I was told, wasn't singing live. He'd talk in between songs. The other guy was singing live, but so I'm not sure whether his voice just wasn't up to scratch anymore, or there's rumors of Kiss now running tracks because Paul Stanley just can't hear it. I'm not going to confirm or deny anything. It's just rumors that I've heard, but people have put out performances of different things. They're going, compare this, man. It's exactly the same. What's going on here? So you can either enhance it. I went and saw Southern Sons recently. They had a bit of a reunion. Yeah, I saw them, and they were running tracks, and Phil Buckle wasn't touring with them, but they got Reggie, their old guitar player, back, who played on the first album and toured with them, and then left. Not through bad things. He was just really busy with life. But he came back, and the first thing I noticed when they came on, it's like, oh wow, you got Phil Buckle's vocals kicking along here. It was very, very obvious.
What's the singer from Southern Sons' name?
Depending on, Jack Jones is what he was then, but professionally in America, he's known as Erwin Thomas.
Erwin.
Yeah, so I've hit up Erwin to come on as well for a chat, so I'm hoping to get him on.
He and I met, I'm just trying to see if I still have his number in my phone.
I do.
So I'm assuming he's back in Australia.
Yeah.
You got to reach out. Oh, great. Yeah, you got to reach out to him for me because he and I and Jess, we were all hanging out together for a good, it was like months. He wanted to do some co-writing with me, and we just never. Yeah, I still want to do it. The guy is so talented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll get his contacts, man. I'll hand it over to you, and if you want to reconnect,
awesome. Yeah. 'Cause I haven't spoken to him in such a long time. He's a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. He was really cool to
Yeah.
me when I was a fan when I was like 16, 17. And he was a young gun. Like I had known of Jack as he was known in Australia back then. When he was 14 years old, like he was in a cover band called Hans Valen, which was a Van Halen tribute band. So
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
heard of him. I'd heard of him because, I was a young fella playing around town and people would bring up two players to me all the time and saying, "Oh, keep it up. You'll be as good as," the other one was, first one was, "Keep it up. You'll be as good as Keith one day." Keith from Brisbane, everyone used to say. Well, Keith was actually from the Sunshine Coast, and Keith was Keith fucking Urban before he
Yeah.
went to the States. And the other one was
Yeah.
Jack. Everyone used to go, "Man, you're great. You should check out this other guy." He was a couple of years older than me. This kid from down Melbourne way, Jack Jones. He absolutely shreds. And, yeah. So, yeah. No, I got a couple of people
Keith's
like.
actually playing. Keith's actually playing today at the Opry, doing a
He's,
live stream.
oh, okay. I was going to say what you're allowed to play, but he's doing a live stream. Yeah.
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 I just hooked up parents with the live stream so they
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
watch it back in the spread.
Yeah.
Keith. I got to watch a Silverchair show here in LA with it was myself, Sean from Seether, Keith, and Nicole Kidman, and we're all four of us is standing there in this little private box, just screaming at the top of our lungs, singing Silverchair songs together. It was amazing. It was so much fun.
Yeah, but I was going to say about Jack, like, so he was a bit of an idol of mine, but I've got to say he was very cool. The fact that after shows I'd go and hang out with him at his hotel room and stuff, and just talk shop and stuff. And I was a 17, 18-year-old kid, and you just like,
Wow,
you can tell who's cool. You can tell who's cool and who's going to be a fuckwit. And yeah, I think he realised that I wasn't going to cause trouble and shit for him. And yeah, although I'd often go to. I can remember taking pretty girl friends of mine. They weren't my girlfriends, but just female friends of mine. And he would sort of try it on and stuff. And I was like, "That's cool, man. That's cool." She's out of my league. Yeah. Yeah. So I was going to mention before, we talked about when I played for Tony Lee Scott. And it was really weird how I got that gig. And this touches on just presenting yourself and all the things that go on into being an artist. I was working at CFM, the radio station, and they were based in South. I say CFM, it was CFM Gold FM was the same place, and I was a producer there, creating commercials and stuff. And on my lunch break, I went to go visit a guy who had a little studio there in Southport. And I had crazy red hair at the time, bright fire engine red, and I had my big skateboard. I got a longboard, and I rocked in. I walked in this dude's studio, and Tony was actually there. And you remember Tony from Zenith, right? The Zenith days. Yeah, I keep mentioning Tony Lee Scott. He was Tony from the lead singer of Zenith.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he went on and he became Sony's big number one male artist they were pushing at the time. And I got the gig playing with him. How I got the gig, I walked into this studio and Tony was there with his guitar player, Scotty, from Zenith as well, who went on to do the thing. I've walked in and we're talking, and Tony didn't remember me from Nemesis and those kinds of bands that we used to play with. And he's taken one look at me and nudged Scotty and goes, "Someone like this dude, right?" And he goes, "Hey, mate, do you reckon you could learn to mime the guitar in 6 months?" And Scotty's looked at him and gone,
like,
"Dude, don't you
hold on
remember
1 second.
Rick?" Yeah. And he goes, "No." And he goes, "Man, he plays guitar." And I'm like, "Oh, really? You hired?" He'd never heard me play. It was the fact that I had red hair, bright red hair, and looked the part at the time. And he had pretty much Zenith play on the record. And this is going to sound really shit. This is going to sound really shit. And I think it is shit. But Sony didn't want a Polynesian band backing him. That's pretty crap.
Yeah.
That's pretty crap. So they had them play on the record, and he wanted Tony to go out and find some cool looking fuckers to play with him live, even if they mimed. That's pretty crap. I'm lucky that I was the guy that walked in at the time. But yeah, that's just how things work. So people have got to bear in mind, if you're trying to sell yourself as an artist, and this is a sad fact, MTV changed this, you've got to look the part. Somebody brought up the fact to me that in this day and age, Stevie Wonder probably wouldn't get a record deal. How shit's that?
I don't know. I wouldn't go as far as that, because I think at the end of the day, talent surpasses. But I mean, again, you also have to. It's almost like comparing, and I'm not supporting that sort of behavior whatsoever because it's not right. But from a marketing standpoint, you have to always sort of consider the other side of the fence, right? So from a large conglomerate like a Sony, of course, they're going to go there. You always want to lead with your best foot forward, right? So in their eyes, the typical makeup of what marketable band is supposed to look like, they're going with that as like take Milli Vanilli for example, right?
Yeah, that's a perfect example. Classic
Yeah.
example. Yeah.
And again, like I love to make money. I think everyone should. I think the relationship that people have with finance is a little skewed. I think there's this fear or I don't know. I think that's that's a totally different psychological.
You did say you wanted to touch on that, so maybe we should touch on finances.
Yeah. Well, like in the sense of it's almost it's very taboo. It's not meant to be talked about, and I think that's the problem. People aren't educated enough to allow themselves the opportunity to make money, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I think given in the last 5 to 10 years, there's been this sort of interesting wash of capitalism bad sort of ideology, which is very, very dangerous, because the other version of which is far more dangerous than anything capitalism could ever do.
Can we just meet somewhere in the middle, please?
Yeah, totally. And I think that like I feel like we've been there for the last pretty much the last 100 years, ever since this system has been sort of residing. Unfortunately, we're just what we're experiencing right now is a reset of which, and I think it's just going to start over again. I think people need to start looking more towards history. That you'll get a clearer vantage point of what the future holds if you take a closer look at history, because it does repeat, and it repeats for a reason.
Yep.
Because it's time for change.
Yep.
But
it's been coming a while.
Yeah. What's that?
It's been coming a while.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, and I think, I don't want to sit here and say that I have a crystal ball, but I think the writing is on the wall as what's about to happen, and I think a discussion of like this. So, like, I'd love to continue doing this further intermittently to help. I think I have an interesting standpoint or perspective, having done the things that I've done, been involved with the people and stuff that I've done over the years, to bring me to a point where I do this for a living. I want to be able to share anything and everything with everyone, so that they have at least an opportunity to do so. Because trust me, no one, and I know that you know this as well because you went through the same thing, no one has been there to show us how to do any of this. We've had to figure it out ourselves. Mm-hmm. But I think at the end of the day, it's all about whether you have the stamina to persevere, because a lot of people just sort of will fall by the wayside because they just give up.
Now, you mentioned finances, man. Like, a lot of people equate fame with money, and that's not the case. And I'm going to bring this up. I used to live with the guys from Sunk Loto. Oh, he's gone for a walk. Okay, I'm going to just cut to me.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're right. He's back. Yeah, you're right, mate. So, the band Sunk Loto. Yeah. So I lived at the family home with Jason and Dane's dad, basically, and Dane was still there, Dibs as we all call him. Jason had moved out at that stage, but they were very popular. They were one of the biggest metal band in Australia at the time. Yeah. I'd go out for a drink with Jason, and he had dudes lined up at the bar wanting to talk to him and shake his hand and all that shit. The guy couldn't afford to buy his own drink, mate. I played in 1927 for a while and Eric Wiedemann, he lost all his stuff, in a divorce and stuff. So finances, it's not going to keep rolling in. People got to understand that. And when I was at CFM, I did a voiceover session late one night with Killing Heidi, who were really big at the time. And you got the core of the band, which was the brother and the sister. The other two guys were just hired hands. They basically walked into the studio and said, "Hi, we're Killing Heidi." And the other two guys went, "We done now? Cool, we'll be in the van." And then Jesse and Ella hung out and did the rest of this. But they invited me to the show that night, and I was talking to Jesse afterwards. This is the brother, and I said to him, "Dude, I know you're really in the public eye and everything right now, and king of the world. I've had a few friends that have been in that situation. Just be really wise with whatever's coming your way, because it won't last as long as you're hoping for. And yeah, you're going to have to keep it." And I remember him looking at me going sort of, "Yeah, whatever, mate. I'm doing pretty good right now, you know?"
Yeah.
But it is true, isn't it? Like
But
especially in the pop world, you've got one kind of shot at it. It's very rare that you've got people with a lasting career in that world. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think primarily because of what their trajectory is and what their goals are, and that is ultimately that sort of, the end goal. I don't know. I think, you take a look at someone like Madonna, for example. Like, that's a classic example of someone that's a brand. Like, Katy Perry is a brand. Kelly Clarkson is a brand. These people aspire to be their own entity so that they are this unlimited brand. And if you do obtain that and you get to that sort of status, it can be never ending, like ridiculous.
Very rare, though. Very rare.
You'd be surprised. I think it's more upon, it more hinders upon how well you can fulcrum within the different sort of aspects of the industry.
Yeah. So I was going to say, you've got to actually adapt to what's going on now. Bowie was a master at it, man. So people say, oh, you like Bowie? Yeah. What's your favorite album? And I say, Earthling. And they go, what?
Yeah.
I say, Earthling.
Yeah.
And never heard of it.
Totally.
It's like, well, drum and bass was the big thing going on in Europe at the time, or jungle. So he didn't say, no, I'm David Bowie, I'd make this kind of music. He went, fuck it, let's get the best producers in on this and let's create some fucking jungle. And I love that record. And on the same record, he worked with Trent Reznor on the song I'm Afraid of Americans. So he kept up with the times.
You got to be able to adjust and roll with. Just real quick, I want to throw a shout out to Jason, because Jason just dropped a solo record. Jason Brown from Sunk Loto.
Yeah.
He just dropped a solo record that he did himself. That is phenomenal. Anyone who's watching or listening right now, definitely check it out. It's brilliant. It's a very much a departure of what Sunk Loto was, but it's Jason.
Yeah. I actually had a little thing going with Jason and Dibbs just as a side project, which we didn't really take anywhere. We just recorded a couple of songs. The Pheromones, we called ourselves. And that was kind of cool to see that other side of Jason, because I first met him when he was a kid getting lessons at the music school I worked at. And he was this young kid with dreadlocks that sang opera like you would not fucking believe. I remember the end of the year concert, he got up there and sang this opera piece, and all the women were just crying. And then I got asked to do a gig at the Playroom, an all-ages show on a Tuesday night. Threw together a little cover band at the time. And before they were Sunk Loto, they were called Messiah, and they came on afterwards. And Dibbs was so small, man. He couldn't see over his drum kit. He's like, and I was expecting him to come out and be one of these. That's what I was expecting, man. He came out and just blasted this fucking metal shit. And then Jason grabbed the mic, and I'm expecting him to sing nicely, and just, and I'm like, what?
It's so funny. So when I was in 28 Days during that, I was a guitar player for 28 Days when, what was that record? Upstyle Down. It was like number one record in the country. And the guitar player screwed up his finger, right? So I got the call, and I had to learn all that. Luckily, I was already a fan. So, and I had done a tour, some shows with 28 Days, supporting them throughout the country in this other band, which shall remain unnamed. But so we were doing this tour around Australia a couple of times, supporting Upstyle Down, and Sunk Loto were on probably about 5 or 6 of those shows. And I had met them from way back when they were still in Messiah, when Jason was just a kid. And then I remember, like, every night after, because Sunk was supporting 28, and late at night, it would always be Jason and I sitting in the green room and backstage. And where the shit that we're listening to backstage is like opera and classical music, and we're nerding out on real music. And it was the first time that I found garnered a brand new friend, bonding over real music, as opposed to just the genres that we were kind of cookie cutter and stuck into at the time. I thought that was really it was very invigorating and surprising at the time, I thought.
Yeah. Yep. No, if you're a child prodigy, man, you're a child prodigy, and yeah, those two brothers totally were. Yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I get a lot of people say to me about my drum programming, and like, they don't believe that it's programmed. And I always say to them, dude, I lived at their place. It was a multi-level place on the side of a hill. So you drove in up top and then walked down, and they had a rehearsal space in the garage above me, above my bedroom. And Dibs would get in there and just practice like all the time while I was sleeping. And this is the strangest thing. I've had this a couple of times where I've lived at places and they've had drums being recorded there or something. It wakes you up at first. You go, what the fuck? And then it puts you into a deeper sleep. And I was subconsciously pulling in the stuff that he was practicing. And then I'd go to program, and people would go, oh, you got Dibs playing on that? I go, no, man, that's me finger banging.
Yeah. Oh, so you do, you know what? I recently purchased, I just made a record recently on an MPC Live. I don't know if you've seen, do you know what those things are?
Yep.
They're amazing. This one's got the touch screen and everything. It's a self-sufficient unit. I can take it down to Echo Park and write songs all day long.
Basically, if people don't know, it's like a series of pads like that on a big controller that you can assign all your individual sounds to, and and
it's a DAW with it, like it's a DAW, like a workstation. I usually with Daggers, I'm more of a grid guy when I do programming stuff. Like sometimes I'll play stuff, but I'm so mathematical that, and everything, of course, is on a grid. I hate to say it, but I love the grid. I love being
to a degree.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. There's a time and a place. But yeah, it's interesting that I have several other producer buddies who they're more of the finger players. I've started to get into it in the last probably, I'd say maybe 18 months of actually playing that way myself on pads. I find it rather enjoyable. It's a lot more fun than sitting there with a mouse and dragging things from bar to bar.
Yeah, absolutely.
As fun
do you find though that if you play to a grid a lot of the time that you get used to that, and that if drummers don't have a good sense of meter, you're just like, fuck, dude, you're 30 milliseconds behind 1 minute, you're fucking 60 milliseconds ahead the next, and you can actually hear, the increments of them.
That's the beauty about living in Los Angeles. I'm in amongst an ocean of amazing talent here. Like my drummer for my bands, TJ, who's also a co-writer of mine as well. We just had a Billboard top 40 Billboard song in the last, I don't know, whenever, maybe a year or so ago. Great drummer, but great songwriter also. Again, it's you mic the guy up and he goes to track something, and he's dead on because of the experience that he's had in a studio environment.
Yeah.
To understand all of those idiosyncratic sort of elements within recording within Pro Tools or something like that. Yeah.
I must apologize to folks. I just did change the battery in my camera. I need to get a power thing because these chats chew through my battery. So that's why I flicked you then. I might have to adjust that. That looks all right. That'll look. It's about there. That's it.
Nice.
So I find that I grew up, I said earlier, before I discovered the guitar, keyboards. Remember that TV show Fame that was on TV back in the 80s? I wanted to be that keyboard dude, man. That was a one-man
Awesome.
fucking band, you know? And
Yeah.
also Howard Jones, Nick Kershaw, all those guys that were big at the time. I wanted to do that. And so I had an organ and it had a drum machine built into it, and I would fuck around with that, and that got my love for it. But I was talking to somebody that was saying about practicing to a metronome. I never did that. I found that very boring, but I always played to machines. So I'm
Yeah.
very picky about drummers. Man, if someone tells me that Virgil Donati is their favorite drummer, I don't even want to jam with them because they're concentrating on the wrong thing.
Most
I
definitely.
mentioned seeing Southern Suns recently, and I filmed them, and people don't hear it. Man, I've just about every clip that I filmed, he'd go for these massive fucking things. He'd lose the one coming back out of it. I'm like, are you serious, man? How are you? Yeah, people are focusing on the wrong thing here. Yeah, you can fucking. Phil Rudd, AC/DC. You watch as many live clips as you can of them. You show me one where he drops a beat. Show me one.
Yeah.
He doesn't.
No, I know. It's one thing that I miss so much in my life. It's just well, for one, it sucks that my drummer is out on the East Coast, so when we have to rehearse, there's a massive commute that occurs. Going back to Memento, like Justin, myself, Latz, our bass player, and Steve Clark was our drummer. This fantastic jazz trained drummer. But the one thing that I miss is we used to have this really great like recording studio but rehearsal space in Hollywood. However tall the ceilings were, it was this amazing sort of space where we all had so much room. And our days this was our job. We're in the studio from 12 p.m. and Justin and I and Latz would work until midnight some nights, but Steve would go home to his wife and family here. But just having that ability of having three guys. I've got my guitar, Latz has got his bass, Justin is over there by the piano and a microphone, and Steve by the drummer. And we're sitting there and we're writing songs from scratch together as a band. That almost never happens anymore. It's so sad.
Yeah.
But I think it takes a certain type of person to survive within that sort of construct as well. There's a lot of trust and communication that has to kind of be outlined for everyone. It's almost like a rule book of sorts, But then again, bands break up because, people break those rules. And trust dies and yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah. But I miss that.
You mentioned about bands breaking up. A mate of mine, I'm not going to name names, but he was on one of the earlier live chats, told me about, and they were Australia's biggest band around 91 or so. He said whenever it came time to doing a new album and they had to split songwriting royalties and stuff, that the drummer and bass player would pretty much turn up to the meeting about how we're going to split this and go, yeah, well, we're fucked, aren't we? Because some people will split it evenly. Others will go, well, no, man, I write all the fucking songs. Why should you get a split on that? It's a big thing, hey? Like, you think people really should talk about that straight up before you even start writing songs, or else you're going to end up in blows, basically. Someone's going to end up with nothing.
Yeah, because so the after effects of which are, it spawns resentment to other members, right? And again, one might say, well, 25% of nothing is nothing. If you're in a sort of you're at a juncture in which there's no traction, there's no nothing, you think you've got the best song in the world and you're about to release it, and how are we going to split it? And one might say, well, it hasn't been released yet and there's no money that's coming in, so, what a ridiculous conversation to have. It's not ridiculous. No. It's not at all. And I've been in situations where we've split things equally on the like we did that in Memento, or at least we tried to across the board. Memento was kind of an interesting situation because it was originally another band, and this was kind of an offshoot of that sort of initial band. So there were some songs there that Stewie Bass co-wrote. So he had to be, percentages were, applied to certain people in those sort of situations. But for the most part, the whole deal was, the Four Musketeers, split it equally, so that it doesn't harbor resentment. But there's other offshoots of potentialities of a situation like that, because then, band breaks up. But there's still an existing publishing deal. There's only one person left that is actively utilizing their publishing deal, and then so some monies have to be paid back by certain people. Does that kind of make sense? I don't want to make it sound like dirtier than what it is, but it's definitely a conversation that people need to have, and they need to have it very seriously, and it should be a long discussion, and I don't think people should be reserved. I think people should be honest when they do have that discussion, because you have to play out all scenarios. You really don't know what can or cannot happen. So always, again, like, be prepared. It's like tying your shoelaces before you go outside.
Yeah.
Same thing applies.
And it's funny because we mentioned about just that competitive thing that people tend to have when they're young and want to keep things to themselves and all that. And I got to admit, I was kind of guilty of that when I was younger. And I'm a completely different headspace now, but it is hard if you know that you've got a bank of cool ideas and stuff, that if you bring it to the party, that somebody else is going to take credit for that. But one thing I noticed, and this is something I'll bring up with you, do you find it a lot easier to work with an artist on their songs than it is for your own, because you're too close to your own? But I've found this, that if somebody plays me a song for the first time, I can see it for what it is. So we talked about Sunk Loto, their last album. They basically went and spent 30 grand, no, it was 10 grand or something, on demos, presented to Sony, and Sony went, thanks, but no thanks. I think it's over. Oh. And that's when they turned up at my door and said, dude, this is the situation. Everyone said we should have come and saw you in the first place, but we went somewhere else. Help. So then and there, Jason and Dibbs came into my place. I didn't have any microphones. I'd lent out stuff, and I think I mic'd the kid up with 3 mics or something, and we recorded a song. But those guys, the better the musician, the more open they are to criticism, not criticism, direction. Yeah. So I sat down, and they had a whole bunch of song ideas, Jason did, and I workshopped those ideas with them and beat them into songs, not just random noise like they originally presented to the record company. So about 3/4 of that record was developed at my place in my bedroom. But it was so apparent when they'd play me the ideas. It's like, yeah, dude, when you go into that second chorus, why don't we do the Neil Finn thing and drop 1 bar so it anticipates just slightly, and just little things like that. And they like, yeah, and I find it hard to do that on your own stuff.
Yeah, of course.
Do you agree?
Well, yeah. So, this is why I smoke as much weed as I do. And I think actually, I used to frown upon utilizing marijuana recreationally massively. I used to frown upon it and kind of despise people that used to use it, because there's this misnomer, especially in Australia, that if you smoke weed, you're just a dull bludger and you're a waste of space.
Yep.
Totally to the contrary. if you delve into the differential of strains and all that kind of stuff, and the purposes of which. So I utilize certain certain types of strains of weed, so that I can gain a third perspective of what I'm working on. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, there will be moments where I'm much less in the studio. Well, lately that I would usually be in, but if I'm working and writing constantly. In writing and production mode, Monday through Saturday, usually in the studio every day, and then I would walk to the bar, and for the rest of the night I'd be sitting on Corona Lights with a notepad with my headphones, and I would buzz myself into getting a third perspective. The other version of which was, just smoke a joint and listen to what I've been working on so that I can, oh yeah, no, that chorus needs to, breathe a little first in the first one so that the second chorus can actually have somewhere to go. Little things like that. Yeah, from experience working with young talent, newly signed or being developed talent, these people don't know, they don't look, they don't think outside the box. That's why they're young and up and coming. And people like us who have been around and had some successes here or there, our job is to reel that in and kind of take all of the it's like Lego or like a puzzle, and you're taking all of the cool parts and just shifting them in such a way so that like you're almost the gatekeeper to the label or to A&R, so that you are going to ultimately present the label something that they can ultimately present the populace with. But then it's twofold, because nowadays there's this weird, crazy resurgence of 80s. Like, there's the good elements of which, and that's the Nick Kershaw's and Howard Jones's and all that kind of stuff, Cyndi Lauper, and even Peter Gabriel. That production aspect of which, I feel like some of the stuff that's actually happening here in the U.S. it's very avant-garde and very obscure, and there's some traction to it, but I swear to God, when we look back upon that stuff in 5 to 10 years from now, it's not going to be revered very well.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, pop like Nirvana was so successful because it was so very pop. Like, it just works.
Cobain himself said he was just writing nursery rhymes.
Yeah. And I think, don't make it more. I love listening to whatever the hell Trent fucking farts out on a record. Like, cool, you're going to bring out Ghosts number 22 now? Awesome. I'm going to be into it. I'm going to buy it anyhow.
Yeah.
I love that stuff. But I also, like, he has a certain type of genius in a way, in the sense that, like, my most favorite song of his of late has been Less Than. Out of the 3 EPs that he produced, there's one song that I just gravitate towards the most because there's this pop sensibility to it. But that doesn't say that I don't love everything else about it also. You have to have something to anchor to. And I think knowing your space, knowing what people like, the answers are there. They're right in front of your face. You just need to see them, I guess.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Trent, man. And like I said, that Alternative Nation was the gig I saw them at. Remember that festival?
Yeah, I was there. Yeah.
How's this, man? I was watching Tool with Matt Boland from Rollerball, who's now the lead singer in Outshined, the 90s tribute band. Mikey's in the house, by the way. Mikey's watching.
Mikey.
I want to get Mikey on. I want to get Mikey on for a chat. Mikey and Maddie, I reckon it'd be great. But I was standing there with Matt, and this guy came and stood just in front of us. And 9 Inch Nails, I'd only heard one. I think Closer had come out. I'd seen the film clip. Right. And I said to Matt, dude, is that the singer from 9 Inch Nails standing just in front of us? And I can remember to this day, his Matt just turning to me, just, how casual, he's just like, and he sort of just turned to me, goes, he's probably chewing gum or something, he goes, nah, it's just some fan trying to look like him, eh? And I just went, yeah, okay. And then I watched that guy.
Was he short?
Well, I watched that guy, and this big security guy come and stood next to him, and then I watched them walk and make their way down and then enter the side entrance. And then when 9 Inch Nails came on, I went, fuck me, that was that guy. And I instantly, that just changed my world. And I'm like, why did I not talk to him? He was just there. How's this though? After that gig, it was a 2-day festival, and we had accommodation booked just down the road. And I'm walking to the hotel, and this Tarago, which was the tour vans of the day, this Tarago drives past, stops and skids, and his head pulls out, and I hear this, Ragroy, and Mikey's going to know who that is. Former manager of my old band, the Pumpernickels, Sparky, drives all the big names. Like you name it, man. Like Bowie, Madonna. He drives them. He picks them up, and it was him. And he's going, "Where you going, dude?" And I'm like, "Oh, just down the road. We got to." He goes, "Jump in." Gives us a lift, and I'm like, "Who are you driving?" He goes, "Oh, Nine Inch Nails." And I'm just like, "Can I stay in the van, man? I just saw them, and that just changed my fucking life." He's like, I can't, man. Sorry. So yeah, I took a little ride in their tour van on the way.
Dude, when I first moved here, our manager for Memento was a woman by the name of Missy Worth. Missy had, managed a lot of people, like Jeff Buckley being one of her most notable, and also worked with Trent on the Downward Spiral. If you have an original copy of the Downward Spiral, one of the first pressings, you'll see Missy's name in the liner notes.
Cool.
Subsequent copies were removed because they had a massive falling out. So I was at the Roxy one night, Stabbing Westward, one of our friends' bands, Stabbing Westward, we were playing at the Roxy. I'm standing kind of like in the middle of, back behind the desk. It's a small venue, I'm sure you've been to the Roxy before, right?
In the one over here in Brisbane? Or
no, LA.
In LA? No.
Yeah.
Lucky Strike was the only place I went to when I was there for live music.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Well, same kind of size, right? Almost. Yep. So I'm standing there, and I see this kind of short, stocky guy walk up to my manager, Missy, and they start arguing, and then they start screaming at each other, and you can kind of barely hear it because Stabbing Westward's playing on stage, and I see this commotion, and I'm like, okay, all right, asshole, get the fuck out of here. So I walk up. And I go to break this up, and I'm like, "Missy, you okay?" And I put my hand on this guy's chest, and I double take, and it's Trent Reznor. Yeah, it's Trent and Missy are screaming at each other because of. She never told me exactly what went down, but I don't know. Trent seems like a very. I don't want to say he's a difficult person to work with. I've heard many a story that being the case, but I mean. It takes a certain type of person that I'm sure many people have many stories about myself. There's a certain point that you reach, and then you become human at a certain point, and you break.
We all have our moments, man. I'm sure there's people that think I'm a fucking knob, but
yeah, but
maybe caught me on a bad day.
My face went from like normal pink to complete white when I'm like, holy shit.
I had my hand on his chest.
My hand is on the chest. Because he looks like he's about to smash my face, but then it all kind of got very light and awesome. So weird. I ended up, long story short, I found out that he was a fan of Digital Daggers and buys shit.
Yeah, cool.
Which is super cool.
I'm going to wrap things up pretty soon. We've been talking for over 2 hours, and when I say wrap things up, that usually goes for another fucking half hour or so. But yeah, anything else that you wanted to touch on? Is anybody still watching that wants Jason to touch on anything? I keep calling you Jason, man. I'm still used to calling you from that space.
Oh, no, it's fine.
I got a Jeff Buckley story. This is passed on to me from someone else. So when I was playing for Sony Tony, as I refer to him, you have drivers from the record companies that pick you up that say, it says 7 a.m. I pick you up. We drive to. We were driving somewhere, and one of the guys, man, I forget his name. He was a really top guy. Told me one time about Jeff Buckley when Jeff came out here for his first tour of Australia, probably the only tour of Australia. He went and saw the show, and he said it was just, man. Everyone was dead quiet.
Was that the show? Was that the Seagulls show? The show at Seagulls?
No, this is in Sydney.
Oh, okay.
And he said he watched the show, and it was so quiet in there when he was singing that you could hear the chicks behind the bar closing the cash registers. Ching! That's how silent everyone was. And he said everyone was mesmerized. Afterwards, he went to go out back to chat to him. He said there was this line of people trying to get out the back. So he went in through the back way and went into the toilets, and he said he's going to take a piss, and Jeff Buckley's standing beside him. He's like, "Hey, man, you realize there's a whole bunch of people waiting?" He goes, yeah, there's a back entrance. Come with me. He said he sat down and hung out with him, and he said, "Man, you're going to be so huge and I don't usually do this with my artists, but can I have your autograph? And he said he looked around and there was nothing to sign it with, but there was a piece of wood. And he said he picked up the piece of wood and he bit it and put his teeth marks in it. And he went, will this do? And yeah, so after he died, this guy's saying, man, I've got this bit of wood with Jeff Buckley's teeth marks in it.
Teeth marks in it. Oh
How
my
cool
God.
is that? Yeah.
I got to meet his mother. We just signed to Columbia Records. What I was doing, I was getting any sort of chance I could get to go down to the office. Most of the labels there are all sort of conjoined. They used to be conjoined in these buildings. It was Epic, Columbia, the MTV studios, all in this one sort of big lot down in Santa Monica. And I would go down there at any chance I could get because I could get free CDs from Columbia. There was this room where you could go in and they'd have these massive big drawers, and I'd take all of their promo CDs. So from Barbra Streisand to AC/DC, because they had Epic, and Epic had just acquired the AC/DC catalog at the time, got all the Jeff Buckley stuff. And Jeff's mother was coming in because they were they were talking about releasing new stuff. So they were going to meet with the product manager that was our product manager. So I got a chance to meet her a couple of times because she was in there quite frequently. But it was kind of weird because I just come off from reading this book called Dream Brother, which is a really great book, a biography of sorts about not only Jeff, but his father as well. And the chapters kind of go sort of in parallel throughout the book. It's one chapter about his a really good book and a really good insight into who Jeff was. And finding stories from, because my manager, Missy, she managed Jeff in up to when he died. She was managing. Okay. Yeah. She would tell me stories of how Jeff would come and visit her late at night as a ghost, really eerie kind of stuff. That guy unfortunately never got to see the level of respect, I think, that he deserved, not only through his peers, but I think from a marketing standpoint, from being well known, because there's so many people I found it very interesting that a lot of people didn't know who Jeff Buckley was, even when, back even in the 2000s. It was insane. I didn't really understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I had a friend, Mel, who was mad on him at the time.
Melissa.
Yeah, Melissa.
Yeah.
You know, she works for APRA now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what her role is. I've kind of lost touch with her. But, she used to be mad on him back in the day and recognise that, this guy's got something special. Yeah. Hey, Space, to wrap things up, man, I'm gonna play around with something here. Mm-hmm. I'm going to try something. I'm going to hit a little button and see if it brings up my countdown. And I'm going to give you the 5 W's and an H treatment in 2 minutes or less.
Oh, God.
So...
What does this mean?
I am going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
I'm just going to say, first thing that pops into your head when I say, and let's see if the timer comes up. Is there a timer there? Yep. Is that going? How do I start it? I go. It's on the clock. Who?
Are you?
What? And let's make it about musical stuff. What?
What compressor?
Where?
Where is this signal chain going?
Where's the signal chain going? I'm moving my head here because I'm trying to move this clock to a place where I can see it. Where? When?
When is sound check?
When is sound check? Why?
Why is sound check?
Why is sound check? How?
How did you get that sound?
Gibson or Fender?
Fender.
Marshall or Fender?
Fender.
Fender or Vox?
Oh, amplification-wise, Vox.
I'm moving like this because the counter's behind my camera. We've got a minute. Cable or wireless?
Oh, cable.
Yeah, even live?
Yeah. I want to get tangled. I want I want to create chaos.
Door of choice.
Pro Tools.
Compressors.
Man, you know what? Smack was my favorite thing ever. It was made by Avid or DigiDesign originally, but I gotta say, Arvox, the new Arvox from Waves, hands down. Thank you.
I love Arvox. And we've got 13 seconds to go. Guitars.
Jaguar, Fender Jaguar.
Monitors.
Oh man. Oh, you know what?
Time's up, but I'm going to let you answer this one.
Okay, I swear by these things. I have expensive monitors in my studio, like ridiculous expensive. Like it's ridiculous. I want to get rid of them, but I'm not going to. The iLoud micro monitors, I swear by these things. They're even the cheaper version, the smaller one, whatever DSP is running in the background on those things, they are to die for.
Yeah.
Everyone should own a pair of the IK Multimedia iLoud. The two separate micro monitors.
Okay, cool. I'm going to look into that.
You will be blown away.
Do people still use NS10s in LA, man?
I see them all the time. I see so many people trying to sell them.
It's all about the power amp you're running them off, eh?
Oh, most definitely.
And a sub.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, so the platform has completely changed. What was a benchmark, 20, 30 years ago, even 40 years ago. Yeah, that's great. It's great to get a flat tone. But I mean, we listen to music on so many a plethora of devices now. It's not, I say, show me a mastering engineer that can really get it all down so it sounds exactly the same on every single device. Bullshit. It's never going to happen.
It's impossible.
So you can take your NS10s. They're lovely. I see a pair right there.
Yep.
Or are they those new ones? Yep.
Yep.
No,
yep.
If for rock music, hands down. For electronic music, I find it very difficult to get the response that I want out of them.
You ever tried them with a sub, like CLA and all those guys do?
Yeah, I have a weird feeling about subwoofers. So to understand the science behind what those frequencies are doing, I'd much rather rely on the math rather than using a sub, because how many subs are there? I understand that some, you can get a nice, expensive sub that's going to be nice and true and flat, but I don't know. I'd much rather rely on the math.
Yeah.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yep, totally. So I've got NS10s and a sub, only because, as I mentioned before, I was a producer in radio, and they had NS10s. They had NS100s as well, the big Safite mounted big fuckers. They were cool. No one ever used them. I did.
God.
I got to, and this was a great thing for me, I got to record voice every day and then wake up and hear it on the radio and go, oh, that didn't work. That was too bright. Ooh, that needs to be a little bit brighter. So that's why I still lean on NS10s. The mid-range, if you can get the separation, there's no low end. That's why I've got a sub. I will quite often, when I'm working on my low end, turn off the NS10s and just have the sub to make sure I've still got separation. Still filling the room, but you're still getting you still got that coming through. If you don't have that, you're fucked. But I'm not going to make any, I'm 6 or something now. The tinnitus and stuff from over the years, especially in this year. So my top end's lacking, I know that. So I've got a little pair of, if I turn these on and go around here. Oh, look at that. There's us on the TV. I got these little guys over here. Which, and you can't see that, I don't think, mate, because you're seeing a different camera to me. Just line that back up. Yeah, it's about there. I read an interview with Bob Clearmountain, and he said he does a lot of his mixing on the little Altec speakers that were branded as Apple that came with the G3 series. And I was in a computer store, and I saw some up in the corner, and they had speakers for sale. I'm like, dude, can I buy those off you? And he went, ask the boss. I got it for $10. I checked my top end on those because they're exaggerated So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Smart.
know your limitations. If I could tell anyone, man, if you've played rock and roll for any amount of time, you've got damage. Know your damage and compensate for it. Don't pretend.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got friends
Yeah. No.
that are friends with Phil Rudd from ACDC, and apparently he's got a studio in New Zealand, and they go, "Oh man, he's deaf. He's fucking deaf. Everything that comes out of there is so
Is
bright."
everything only on one side? You can imagine you'd put the cans on it. It's like, why is it only coming out of the one speaker, Phil? I can barely hear it over here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh God. Yeah,
Ja-
you have to. Yeah, and again, it's like you know what you teach yourself, right? You can develop bad habits also, but you don't want to change your monitors like too much or
no,
late in the game.
pick
You've
one.
trained your ear.
Pick one, learn it. It's the same with digital audio workstations, DAWs. I feel funny saying that to Americans because of my accent. Because they'd say "DAW" and I say "door," and they're
Yeah.
like, "What are you talking about?" Yeah. So the accent thing is a bit funny. Hey,
What
I was going to
I
say,
was going to say.
is there? We're both really excited here, and the lag's making that awkward. What words did you find when you moved to the States were completely different? You know, there's footpath. We say footpath, and they say sidewalk and
Yeah,
stuff. So I bring this up because I was talking to Thomas Blug. I don't know if you know Thomas. He's a European guitar player. He makes Blue Guitar is the brand. Jennifer Batten and stuff are using his floor amps. And as I said, I have a good rave with people an hour before and after the 3 hours that we broadcast. And he's been to Australia many times. And he said, there's this one word you guys say that nobody else says. Quad box. It's an Australian thing,
Totally.
apparently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is.
What other terms have you found when you moved over there that people would pick you up on?
Uh, shit. That's a really good question.
Do,
It's
do they say punter?
yeah.
They do say
No,
They don't, do
they
they?
don't. No. Although I've heard shit that David Draymond actually has said the word punter to me before.
I said it to Nuno Betancourt many years ago. I was lucky enough to hang with Nuno on my 21st birthday. He was out here on his honeymoon with Suze, and I've known baby animals a long time. And I said the word punter to him along the way, and he kind of looked at me weird.
Interesting.
And I said, "Oh, you guys don't say that?" No, no. I said, "What do you guys call them?" He goes, "Fans." And I went, "Oh, of
Yeah,
course,
no,
yeah,
totally. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
The audience.
yeah, yeah, yeah."
The house. What else is there? Nothing rings to. Jeez, what if I can't think of anything? I maybe because I'm so kind of enveloped in the culture here that it's just completely escaping me. I remember there was probably a plethora of words that I'm sure, we were crazy when Justin Latz and I first moved here. We were rambunctious, very rambunctious. And we were, I think, notably called the crazy Australians because we're just drinking, having fun. And like, we're in the US. We just signed a record deal, we're acting like idiots. I don't know. I don't think people really understood anything that we were about at the time, but I'm sure a lot of people couldn't really understand us.
Do you you watch guitar YouTube videos at all, man? Do you know some of the YouTubers? Do you know who Phil McKnight is? As in, like,
No,
know your gear, or 5 things you didn't know about the Fender Stratocaster, shaved head.
no.
Phil's huge. I'm actually going to get him in probably not next week, the week after as a guest. But I remember sitting in the back of a car. I'd just gone with Phil to film a segment. He has this thing, Sharpen Your Axe, where he'll take a guitar and then do it up, basically, an off-the-shelf guitar. And we had Tom Quayle. Do you know Tom Quayle, the guitar player on YouTube, man? He's absolute shredding, legato, fusion-style player. Mind-blowing. We got him to play an off-the-shelf Ibanez, a cheaper one, in Indo, and remember what it feels like. And then we took it to this other luthier down the road to play with it and replace things and then give it back to Tom and see if he could feel the difference. As we're driving back, Phil says to me, "Hey, man," he says, "you talk like that character in that movie I just saw the other day." And I can't think what it was. but it was a Kiwi. It was like a character in it was like a big, oh shit, is it the Avengers or something where there's a big somebody, he's got the Kiwi bro accent, and he's going, you talk like that character, and I'm like, to me, man, that's a completely different accent. That it's, hey bro, how you doing, you know? And I started doing it. He goes, yeah, that's exactly it. That's how you talk. I'm like, well, my dad's a Kiwi, so maybe I might have a hint of that or something.
A little bit of inflection,
Yeah.
I've gotten some flack. When I would usually hang out with because I'd spend a lot of time in the studio, so the first thing I would want to go to is a bar to hang out just by myself, have my own time, enjoy a nice cold beer or 20. And if I ever heard anything that would be remotely close to an Australian accent, it would pique my interest, and I'd be like, "Oh, where are you from?" And I would often, and I feel like such an asshole for saying this, I would often mishear or just assume that they were Australian because I'm Australian, and sometimes I would get, "No, New Zealand." I'm like, "Oh, sorry." Like, okay, get off your high horse. You didn't have any sort of choice whatsoever to be born in whatever country that you were born in. So, I mean, just slow down. I'm saying hello is basically, hey, what's up?
It's like calling a Canadian an American, isn't it? It's like,
no, totally.
Can't you hear my accent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just be pleased that someone addressed you. How about that?
Yeah, cool. Space, it's been fucking awesome chatting to you, man. And I no doubt that once we go off air and I take another pee break, that we'll probably keep raving for a little bit more. But I want to thank you, man. You were the first guy that actually wanted to have on one of these chit chats, just because I know you, and you'd be a bit more lenient if I turned on the camera and went rubbing the headlights, which I do. I'm the first to admit the first 2 minutes of my chit chats are fucking terrible. I talk too fast. I stutter and I stammer, but I tell my guests that, and you just got to do it. And we're up to like 20 episodes or something, and it's getting a bit more comfortable. So, yeah.
Dude, like I said to you yesterday before, like we did a little test run to make sure everything was working. And like I said yesterday to you, man, like don't ever stop doing this. Like, again, it's like whatever you're doing is right. And as you'll see, as the years pass and the months pass, the weeks pass, and the guests change, you will find it's just like picking up the guitar for the first time or jumping on stage for the first time. It's nervous at first, but with that time comes experience, and that's what's so amazing, whether it be music or just life in general. This is just one massive learning experience, and we get to do it, and we should be stoked about that.
Totally. I've got a split screen going, man. I'm going to see if we can do a high five, a virtual high five. If I'm about, it's all backwards. I'll go a bit higher. Ready? 2, 3, go. No, you're on the wrong side.
Oh, this side?
That side. That's it. Bam.
All right.
Gotcha. Virtual high fives. Woo.
Nice.
Space, thank you so much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank Space.
Thanks for having me, brother.
No worries, man. Peace out, folks.